Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. Sir, I must admit, this morning at 4 o'clock, when I was trying to cobble together my thoughts for this response, I was very much at a loss to know where to start off from, because there have been so many issues that have been raised by the opposition, so many matters that have actually been left out by them, which was actually specifically pertinent to the budget. There were so many issues that were raised that were completely irrelevant to the budget, and there was so much distortion of history itself. And I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that lack of moral compass, quoting from the Bible, yet saying and doing things that are completely contrary to what the Bible teaches. Talking about the present based on a distorted historical analysis, which then perpetuates into today's contemporary Fiji. So the lack of basic economic analysis by the opposition, sir, stems from a couple of philosophical problems. One of them is clearly demonstrated by Honourable Kurindrani when Honourable Bulitavu was commenting on the budget, which he thought was a positive response. He actually stood up and objected to Honourable Bulitavu, saying positive things about the budget. I note that he did not do the same when Honourable Mere Nalumatua said some positive things. I note he did not do that when Honourable Aseri Rondondo said some positive things. He targeted Honourable Bulitavu. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, what it also goes to show is that the opposition have come to this chamber with the view that anything that is presented by government, and in this particular instance in the budget, must be opposed, irrespective of whether the policy that's been announced is good or not. They have to oppose it. In the same way, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I found this very disconcerting, but it again demonstrates, Mr. Speaker, sir, the mindset of the opposition. Honourable Kurindrani, who I'll be referring to a few instances in today's speech, said that the reason why the opposition did not make a statement on 2 members of parliament who've been convicted by an independent judiciary is because he believes the judiciary is not independent. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the same mindset. This is the same mindset that existed in the previous governments. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to warn the Fijian public that if FijiFirst is not in government, the alternative government would be made up of people who will systematically... Order. Before you spoke. Order. Order. Which will systematically, Mr. Speaker, sir, undermine all independent institutions. They have systematically done it. We saw that happen, Mr. Speaker, sir. We saw that happen, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the governments prior to 2006, in particular after 1987. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have had members of the opposition.
Order. What is your point of order?
It's irrelevant.
It's very irregular when there's a right of reply being made for you to raise a point of order. What is your point of order?
That's what he's talking about is irrelevant of what I made a point of order yesterday. My point of order yesterday was that the Honourable Mbulitabo was breaching the protocol of this parliament.
Honourable member.
And it's irrelevant.
Honourable member, take a seat. You made your point of order yesterday, and I told you that a debate was going on. We are debating the contents of the budget. That's what we were doing. And he's got every right to say that. The other members got every right to say what they say. That was what was happening. Honourable Attorney General, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. As I was saying, sir, and Honourable Kurindrani again has dug himself in a hole. There's no such protocol. Mr. Speaker, sir, every single independent institution will be under threat by any other political party that comes into government. I wish to inform people who work at FijiFirst, people who work in the judicial system, people who work in the DPP's office, people who work in the Fiji Police Force, people who work at the Auditor General's office, all of their professionalism will be under threat by people such as them. God forbid if they ever gain power. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I wanted to make also, sir, is that the analysis that were taken by the honourable members, most of it was in fact very much personalised. Most of it, Mr. Speaker, sir, was not on the budget itself. Mr. Speaker, sir, the point that I also wanted to raise was that the sense of indignation that was made or demonstrated by members of the opposition was very much constricted and restricted. Because their sense of who should have empathy or who we should have empathy for, who we should assist, is only for a select group of people. Whether it's a group of elites, whether it's a group of people in one particular ethnic group, that essentially was what their premise was on, fundamentally. Whereas the difference between a leader like Honourable Bainimarama in this party is that we assist people on a needs basis. People who need assistance will get it. It's not based on provincialism, it's not based on tikina, it's not based on ethnicity, whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim or a iTaukei or Indo Fijian or Rotuman, whatever it is. You are assisted on the basis that you need that assistance. You are connected to electricity as a result of you not having electricity. You are given water as a result of not having water. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have on numerous occasions by members of the other side come to me and see me at lunchtime or morning tea time, asking me to do certain things for them or people who they want to assist. And when I have said to them, and they know who they are, when I've said to them, I cannot do this because the law does not allow me to do so, they said, Are you the Attorney General, do it. What it demonstrates, sir, is that if they were to ever hold such positions, they would abuse their positions. It's a fundamental issue, sir. It's a fundamental issue. Order. And we saw that, sir. We have seen that happen in previous governments. It happened. People threw their weight around. We had right from after 1987, ministers writing on the back of A4 paper saying, give this person a loan, and they would get a loan at NBF. We have seen previously, Mr. Speaker, sir, people writing the back of papers to say, give this person a license, give this person this, bugger the law, but let's do it. We have seen, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Elections Office have just recently issued notices to NFP and PAP, the PAPIs, about how they've breached the law, fundamental breaches, how they've actually lied about certain things, sir, about how they have used their Facebook page to spread misinformation, albeit it was done 4 years ago, but is currently on their page. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, encaptures. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, that encaptures. Mr. Speaker, that encaptures. Mr. Speaker, sir, that encaptures. Mr. Speaker, sir, that encaptures the thinking and the outlook towards governance by the members of the opposition. It's a fundamental issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point...
Order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Attorney General, should have some sense, because he is the Minister for Election, he is the Minister responsible for the Elections Office, he complies to the Supervisor of Election, the Supervisor of Election sends a notice to us, sends a response to us, we have the right. He is judging what the Supervisor of Election is saying. I mean, we know where it's coming from. This is a video from 2018 He is saying that the law should be applied retrospectively. That's what he's saying.
Honourable member, you say you have the right. He's got the right as well. He's got the right to do so. You have the floor, Attorney General.
Sir, this so classically demonstrates the point I was making earlier on. He says that I'm the Minister of Elections. But he, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, he forgets that under the Fijian Constitution, sir, that the Electoral Commission and the Fijian Elections Office are independent bodies. And he forgets to mention the fact that the video in question, Mr. Speaker, sir, the video in question is on their Facebook page and does have lies on it. I'll leave it there, Mr. Speaker, sir. He knows where it's coming. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
The other point I wanted to make, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that it's a sense of justice that we must talk about. Mr. Speaker, sir, you see, you can have what we call form over substance. What is preferable, obviously, is substance over form. You can stand up and pontificate about justice. You can stand up and pontificate about governance and all of that. But when your very actions, when your very thinking actually is contrary to that, that means you're a hypocrite. Many people in this country left after 1987, not because of economic reasons. They left because they felt there was no justice. They felt that if they were to apply for a job, they won't get it on merit. They felt that if they were to try and get a license, they won't get it. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, they don't feel a sense of justice. Whether it's on provincial basis, whether it's on ethnic basis, whether it's on religious basis, whether it's on the basis of cronyism, they left as a result of that. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. The difference is that people now feel that there is a sense of justice. People now know that people will be treated equally. People now know that when they apply for jobs, there is a thing, for example, in the civil service called OMRS. People now know that just because the Prime Minister is from Tailevu, it doesn't mean all civil service will be coming from Tailevu. As the man who he supports said recently in Takondrove, he said, when I was Prime Minister, 70% of all the top civil service were from Takondrove. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is, sir, the point is that these are the fundamental philosophical differences and way of thinking between this side of the chamber and that side of the chamber. But more importantly, sir, it also demonstrates that their analysis is imbibed, it's drowned in that way of thinking. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, it was very interesting that Honourable Ngavoka, for the first time in the past 8 years, gave a relatively comprehensive take on taxation. And obviously we know where that comes from. The people from FRCS who are obviously helping inform our staff, who may have left under dubious reasons, Mr. Speaker, sir. But what is really interesting is this, that like most of the people from the other side, there is no rationality in the policy. He said for one of the things he'll do, firstly, is that he will increase taxation for corporates, will go up to 28% or whatever. Then all foreign companies will all go up to 33%. So we would like everybody in this country to know, all businesses, large or small, small, micro, medium, whatever, you'll pay 28% tax. Those who are even exempt will pay tax. And we also want all foreign companies to know that they will now pay 33% tax. Many of the resorts, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Fiji, are owned, island resorts in particular, owned by foreigners. So we want them to know, we want their staff to know that they will all pay 33% corporate tax. And let's see what will happen after that. Let's see the level of confidence in investing and reinvesting in Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point he said is that he was going to get Water Authority Fiji and other industries to pay resource tax to landowners. Mr. Speaker, sir. Water Authority of Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, is funded by government. It's funded by government, sir. So the government will be funding this tax, not a private entity. The entire operations and capital expenditure of Water Authority of Fiji is funded by government. And, of course, Water Authority of Fiji is not in Laos. So, how will the Laoan people benefit from this? There may be more resources used in one particular province than some other provinces. Will they get a larger chunk of the tax? What will happen to those people who don't actually have those industries in their provinces? Will they get the tax? Will the people who have more resources being used by these entities say, hey, you give us the bulk of it? Guess what it's going to do? It's going to lead to provincial differences, Mr. Speaker, sir. They have a formula, but they fail to actually tell us what the formula is, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, what we do, Mr. Speaker, sir, is we tax people across the board, we exempt people across the board. And those tax revenues are then driven and given to people who need the most. A lot of taxation, Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot of taxation is derived from Suva, from the Western Division. But we use that money to cut a road in Tawake, in Undu Point, give people water in Laos. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. The point of the matter is this, by trying to do this along these lines, will actually be contrary to what we are saying. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I wanted to also make was that as I was this morning thinking, and I sort of came up with this thought and said, I said, the present is actually informed by the past. The present is actually informed by the past. And if we don't understand the past in our present, then our future will be ill-informed and therefore unstable and even turbulent. I want to repeat this, sir. The present is informed by the past, and if we don't understand the past in our present, then our future will be ill-informed and therefore unstable, even turbulent. And that's precisely, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, that's precisely the problem with the opposition. They don't want to actually get a true representation of the past. The entire thesis of the opposition, the political narrative of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, in particular, those who argue on the basis of ethnicity is demonstrated clearly by Honourable Tanya Wanganika, Honourable Tuisawau, etc. They have a wrong analysis of factual analysis of what happened in Fiji. The two protagonists, and let me be frank about this, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the two protagonists that have been portrayed in the political landscape in Fiji prior to pre-independence and post-independence is this supposed ethnic tension and ethnic threat by Indo Fijians taking over Fiji. That's a fundamental premise. If you read all the literature, fundamental premise, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the same leader. This is the same leader, sir, Honourable Gavoka. Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the same weak leader of Sodelpa who justified outside this chamber Honourable Mitali Bulana Uda's racist comments, saying that the PM was a murderer, saying that the PM was a racist, saying that I was a terrorist, on the basis. Honourable Gavoka said, oh, he said it because he feels very passionate about indigenous rights. It's the same way that Garase justified Daudau's comments in Parliament when she said Indo Fijian is like paragrass. The same philosophy. He's justified. Stop saying please, because you're a weak leader. You are not based on principles and values. Unlike this man. Unlike this man, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now get back to my point regarding history.
Mr. Speaker, sir, point of order. Point of order. Honourable Attorney General is generalizing as usual. Generalizing as usual and misleading. Because he is labeling all of us here as racist. Because that's his perspective.
You are racist.
And he is a racist himself. Let me read this out. Let me read what he states. Let me read it out.
That's your point of order.
Because it's misleading.
You made your point of order.
And that's his perspective. It's nothing to do with us. We are entitled to form our own perspective of how we develop. And his perspective is his own. It's nothing to do with us. You develop your own perspective, we do ours.
Honourable member, you all had your say very precisely on the floor of this House. I heard it. Everybody heard it. Now he's replying to what you've said. That's his right. If he generalizes, he generalizes. You have the floor.
Sir, I did not generalize. I said those people who said that. That's where they're coming from. Mr. Speaker, sir, the historical basis of this country, because they always talk about land. We've given land and therefore, you've got to do this, otherwise there'll be turbulence. Mr. Speaker, sir, everybody knows. Read facts, books, read here, chart of the land, all of this stuff. Read this. Academically written, historically researched, factually based, sir. You haven't read it. There's a problem. Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is that land, ethnicity land was alienated in this country not by Indo Fijians but by the European settlers. Everybody knows that. It was alienated by the colonial government. One of the very few countries, Mr. Speaker, sir, in that colonized period where there was no resistance to European control, British control. Mr. Speaker, sir, it's a fact. It's a fact that some chiefs gave away land to impress European settlers. It is a fact that some chiefs exchanged land for some muskets, for some guns, or even for some food. That's a fact. Those lands were alienated then. Not a single millimeter of land has been ever alienated, legally or illegally, by Indo Fijians in this country. Yet, Mr. Speaker, sir, they are seen as a threat. That's a fact. That's how it's portrayed, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to quote, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to quote. And this is when, they used to wanted to have the right to vote. And there was a J.J. Ragg, we all know the Ragg family. J.J. Ragg said, he urged one of the chiefs, Tuita Levu, and this is a quote, he said, we must endeavor to permeate the whole of the Fijian race, meaning ethnicity, we must endeavor to permeate the whole of the Fijian race with the fixed idea that the granting of the franchise and equal status to the Indians in Fiji would mean the ultimate loss of all their lands and rights, and later their final extinction from the face of the earth. That philosophy, Mr. Speaker, sir, was ingrained very deeply, and it resonates in today's Fiji also. It resonates in the justification of 87 coup. It resonates in the justification of removal of the Chaudhry government in 2000. That is a fact, Mr. Speaker, sir. So if we are to look into the future, to build a strong economy, to build a strong nation, we must rid ourselves, exercise ourselves, get rid of all this ghosts from the past. It's a fact, Mr. Speaker, sir. Today, till today, in colloquial language in Fiji, if you say to somebody you're a Keidolo, it's a negative term. But there is a place called Dolo. There were people from Dolo who resisted British control. And today it's been imbibed in our culture that if you call anybody Keidolo, it's a negative term. But people from Dolo, there were 70 to 80 people killed. There's no standing British army. They brought in ethnicity people from the eastern divisions of Fiji and formed what they call the first native constabulary. There are people from Ra who were exiled to Kandavu because they resisted British control. That is not taught in our history. That is not understood. That is why, for example, when Ratu Sukuna did all the provincial the land stuff, Navosa was put together with Nadronga. Navosa was split up into other provinces. That's the reality. Don't romanticize the past. Don't put a narrative that is not true. We till today have people in Ba, in Nandi, complaining about the way the land was alienated to different Itokotokas and Matangalis because of political considerations at that point in time. Please, let's not romanticize. Because if you don't romanticize, if you talk about the facts, then you can actually have a better future. We can make the right decisions, sir. Let's not forget the fact that Honourable like Seruratu talked about. When the people in Monasavu gave up their land for the electricity, for Monasavu Dam, how much were they paid? They didn't even get electricity. This man gave them electricity. Let's understand that. When they did the Fiji Hardwood Corporation, Mr. Speaker, sir, the mahogany plantation, 1950s and 60s, the ethnicity people paid peppercorn rent. 1 shilling, 2 shillings. Mr. Speaker, sir, we fixed it up. He fixed it up. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, so these are the realities that they need to understand. Let's shed ourselves of all this nonsense about the past. This fabricated narrative, Mr. Speaker, sir. Only then we'll have true analysis. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I wanted to make also was, you know, I've said this so many times, you know, please read people like Simeon Durutalo. He is one of my heroes, actually. Please read, yes, great man, you'd learn. Your world would broaden. Read people like William Sutherland. They have a historical narrative of Fiji that was. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, and the power and economic dynamics that helped develop this colony and what perpetuates till today into our present. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I also wanted to make, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that Honourable Bulanauda, this is the same man, and I need to say this again. In 2000, sir, when on an hourly basis, the Chaudhry government was slowly being dismantled on an hourly basis, Honourable Bulanauda, and there's a video of it at USP in the library, standing outside Civic Centre, and he said, the executive, the judiciary, is ruled by the Kendia Hindu Tevoro. He did that. It's there. He knows that. Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't want him to start standing up and repenting. I know he's not going to do that. But my point is this. When you have people with that mindset and the leader of his party defending him, Mr. Speaker, sir, it goes to demonstrate.
Is this relevant, Honourable Speaker? This is the relevance in all this, Honourable Speaker. It's not relevant. Please. Please. Relevance, Honourable Speaker. Let's move on, please.
Honourable member.
Let's stop relevant in the past.
You have the floor, Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have only raised these issues because they raised it, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, if they had not, I would not have. Mr. Speaker, sir. But
point over for clarification, Honourable Speaker, sir. I already mentioned it. I already explained that in this House. Nothing is said in a vacuum.
Is what?
Thank you, sir.
So he's justifying what he said, nothing is said in vacuum. So in other words, Kendias Hindus are Tevoros. Tevoro, for those people who don't know, means the devil. Mr. Speaker, sir. It is...
Point of order, Honourable Speaker, sir. Point of order, Honourable Speaker, sir.
What is your point?
Sir, to clarify further, I think the Honourable Minister of Economy doesn't understand what I meant by that. And let me explain it.
Understand what you want to say.
When people say that the native land to become nationalized, and the land use across the board without the landowner's consent, that hurts the ethnicity. That's what I said. Nothing is said in a vacuum. And people say things like that. You'll say things appropriately, Honourable Speaker, sir. Thank you, sir.
Honourable Attorney General.
Sir,
Order.
Sir, Honourable Member compels me to respond to him. The government at that point in time, under that constitution, could not have taken away land without the consent of the landowners. The land laws were still in place. So it's not justified, sir. You see, the idea, this is, again, thank you very much. This brings me to the point that this budget, the comments made by the other side was based on conjecture. Everything was based on conjecture. What if this was there? Oh, the idea is there. They're saying this, that means it means this. Right from Honourable Prasad the other day making comment outside saying, oh, because Fiji Airways is now going to manage AFL, that means ATS will be affected. What's it got to do with ATS? ATS is a union-based company, therefore they'll get affected. All conjecture. Trying to build this kind of cathartic moment, some big conspiracy, that's the word. Some conspiracy is going to take place. Mr. Speaker, sir, the last point I want to just delve on this. I remember, I don't know, I don't think it was last year. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I wanted to also make was about, this way of thinking gets leaders to start thinking in a dichotomous manner. Everything is like us and them, basically. Dichotomous, you should know, you're a smart man. Mr. Speaker, sir, I remember once I used the word eschatology and you went, oh, Mr. Speaker, sir. Speaker, sir, I remember a few years ago, about 3 years ago, sir, I remember 3 years ago, Honourable Bala was here too, unfortunately not here with us because of personal reasons, and we were all standing up and talking about how Roy Krishna, this football player, had been given some international recognition. And we all congratulated him. Honourable Levere stood up and said, we must not forget about the rugby players. How can us talking about and celebrating Roy Krishna's achievement have anything to do with rugby players? We will praise rugby players when rugby players will achieve that. We praise them all the time. But you see, there's this thing that if you're gonna praise Roy Krishna, who's a football player, he's Indo Fijian, we must cover the other side too. Honourable Prime Minister congratulates people, sports players. We don't suddenly say, oh, you must then congratulate the other group too. This is the way of thinking. What it means, sir, is that you cannot have nationhood. You cannot have nationhood. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to quote a very simple quote from one of the founders of NFP, A.D. Patel. And he said this in the 60s. He said, won't it be better if we thought less of our race and more of our nationality? Very simple quote. Very simple quote by A.D. Patel. Won't it be better if we thought less of our race and more of our nationality? The unfortunate thing, of course, now is today's NFP's leadership does not really believe in that because they join a person who actually thinks along the headlines. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to take this.
Order.
Sir, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the thousands of Fijians who actually. I'd like to thank, Mr. Speaker, sir, thank all those thousands of Fijians who helped us shape the 2022-2023 budget. Indeed, sir, I'd like to thank all those who helped us shape the other 4 budgets prior to this. Honourable Gerengere Tambua the other day made a very flippant comment. Most of the comments are quite flippant, sir, based on sort of sarcasm. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm taking all of you. I'll take you first. Are you a woman? Huh? Is Honourable Anoda a woman? Honourable Gavoka a woman? Get your facts right. Mr. Speaker, sir. And she said, oh, we're going to do another review in 6 months. We've done this review so many times. Mr. Speaker, sir, it demonstrates that under a Prime Minister, the government is actually responsive and agile enough to changing circumstances. We are not rigid. The world is volatile. Nobody expected a pandemic. The moment pandemic started, the moment we had our first cases, we did a revision of the budget because we knew what it would mean. If we had figures based from 1920 budget, which had projected to have X number of tourists because nobody expected the borders to close, and even though the pandemic came and the borders were closed, our figures would have meant nothing. So we had to revise it. In the same way, we have to revise this budget. If tomorrow, God forbid, the war spreads in Europe and changes circumstances altogether, are we going to say, this is the budget to stick to it? No. You have to respond to it. That level of agility was precisely what saved us from going down the path of many other countries, sir. We responded to it with agility. We knew, therefore, our foreign reserves will get depleted. We don't have tourists coming in. So what do? We change our borrowing methodology. We change the people we borrow from. We need to build our foreign reserves. Otherwise, we won't have foreign reserves. We won't be able to buy fuel, medicine, other imported items. We did not have that problem. Other countries, debt is a different issue. Mr. Speaker, sir, but you need to have the level of foreign reserves, in particular when you're largely importing country, to be able to buy those things. They don't tell you that. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank all those thousands of Fijians who helped us. And Mr. Speaker, sir, given that I have the latitude of time, I would like to also thank all the staff too, Mr. Speaker, sir. Where we went to, and I want to specifically mention the people in Tawake and Loa. We went to those two villages, and we received, Mr. Speaker, sir, with a lot of enthusiasm, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I'd like to also thank the women entrepreneurs who participated, the farmers, the private sector people, the civil society groups, region youths, etc., that provided suggestions, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to also thank the staff at Ministry of Economy, the staff at FRCS, and also the staff at the Solicitor General's Office. Mr. Speaker, sir, what is really interesting, and Honourable Randondro, you should make a note of this, is that most of these people are below the age of 40. Most of them. Most of these people would not be holding these positions if it was not for OMRS. These are young, committed, bright, energetic, qualified Fijian civil servants. And from the bottom of my heart, I really wish to thank them, sir, because the way the opposition speak, they don't realize the hours that are put through this, the troubleshooting that we do, the punching of holes we do when we finally before we present the budget finally, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank the Permanent Secretary for Economy, Siriganda, Mr. Speaker, sir, below the age of 40, from a good province, Nanronga, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have to control myself. I won't get into provincialism. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mark Dixon, the CEO of FRCS, those of you who may want to know, he's an expatriate, but damn good one too, doing a good job. Nemea Dawai, Head of Treasury from Ministry of Economy. Isua Talmembao, the Head of Budget and Planning. Shivendra Nath, yes, went to the wrong school though. Shivendra Nath, the Chief of Staff of FRCS. Kamal Gounder, Manager Infrastructure Sector. Kelera Rovono, Manager Social Sector. Mere Dakauni Tambua, Principal Analyst Economic Services. Kiman Mala, Manager General Administration Sector. Sundia Ben, Manager Fiscal Policy. Tui Sikivo, Manager Macroeconomic Policy. Nitesh Chand, Manager International Cooperation. Cecilia Nalande, Manager Debt. These are the senior management team, Mr. Speaker, and very quickly I would like to mention the others, and I wish to do this, sir. Poonam Singh in Budget and Planning, Sandeep Kumar, Anike Singh, Ashlyn Singh, Shanil Prasad, Lendua Vakaloloma, Frida Fremlin, Laurie Singh, Namrata Singh, Miriama Ketendromo, Tari Bebea, Alumedi Rokum Biau, Malvina Singh, Ankit Prasad, Alipate Kete, Pranita Raj, Aparosa Tuiwalese, Anre Jyoti Prasad. Fiscal Policy Research Analysis Division, Kavita Ram, Asenada Lewaragu, Vinay Singh, Eleanor Vodenduandua, Asmita Chand, Salen Kumar, Andy Josephini Koro, Shafia Hassan, Shamal Chand, Vasemada, support staff of Vasemada, Salaivalu Mbola, Chese Nambala Rua, Samisoni Tiko. Treasury team, Asenada May, David Felici Wilco, Sarah Ithel, Akeneta Temo, Zaina Khan, Emma Rokowanga, Letila Tuyalani, Atin Chan, Shavnil Kumar, Vinay Krishna. From FRCS, Shalini Kumar, Momina Beg, Tale Katimbau, Tima Rayawa, Rahul Gounder, Ronit Singh, Krishnil Krishna, Monish Prasad, Sherlyn Hassan, and Anasa Matakede. From the Solicitor General's Office, the Acting Solicitor General Pritika Prasad, the Assistant Solicitor General Mary Lee, Glennis Andrew, Valerie Narayan, Mona Lisa Factophone, Suliana Tauke, Yambaki Bosundrau, Zanuba Bhatti, Maria Dombona, Priscilla Singh, Shiksha Rup, Zaki Ali, and of course we had some assistance from David Solovalu, one of the drafting people from another organization. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like all of us to put our hands together for them. These are the young men and women actually who are behind the scenes, and we ate many ice creams at about 2 a.m. in the morning, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to, of course, thank them back, and I'd like to now get into some of the main issues, Mr. Speaker, sir. before I do that, I also wish to, again from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Speaker, sir, thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his leadership, for his guidance, his ability, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I say this unreservedly, unequivocally, his ability to think outside the box, the ability to be agile and flexible to changing circumstances, demonstrates that no other Prime Minister ever had to do this. No other Prime Minister has ever had to deal with a pandemic one he after experience, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I'd like to really thank him for that, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are on a strong path of economic recovery. And when we said the Bula boom, they made fun of it. Why did we say the Bula boom, sir? Because we are now welcoming tourists to this country with the big Bula that we've known about. The big Bula smile, the big Bula experience. That's why we're calling the Bula boom, sir. We had only 34,000 tourists last year. Some of it would be returning Fijians, visiting friends and relatives. We're now going to come to about 500,000 tourists. That is a boom. We're obviously from a low base, but it is a boom, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, and they made fun of it. No matter how much they try and refute it, that is the fact. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are now, the figures were revised to 12.4%. We are now looking anecdotally, it may be even more. And that is a conservative sum. They made fun of that. Honourable Prasad said, no matter what, pandemic or whatever, he said, you still had a contraction. So, in other words, tomorrow, if we have an earthquake, if we have a volcano like Tonga did, and we then say the economy will get the economy will get contracted, sir, he will then say, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, he will then say, oh, I don't care about the volcano, you still had a contraction. I don't care about people dying, you still had a contraction. This is the level of contribution, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, as he knows and everybody knows that the 2022 growth, Mr. Speaker, sir, is coming from a low base after a massive 17.2% contraction in 2020 and a 4.1% contraction in 2021. Every single country in the world was affected by the COVID pandemic, sir. We faced our highest ever economic decline. And, I'll say it again unequivocally, it was because of decisive and strong leadership. We were criticized so many times. When the Prime Minister said we'll do a lockdown, based on science, based on health advice, we'll do bubbles. They said don't do bubbles, don't do lockdowns. When we then lifted it up, they said do lockdowns, do bubbles. Mr. Speaker, sir, when we heard the word vaccine, we immediately were to our development partners, Honourable Prime Minister, Foreign Ministers, on the phone, talking bilaterally to different countries, saying we need the vaccine. We were talking to ADB, World Bank, we need vaccine, because we knew there would be what we call vaccine injustice. Because smaller countries, Mr. Speaker, sir, smaller countries, sir, would get pushed to the bottom of the line. And I need to say this again. If USA is going to go to a pharmaceutical company and say, we're nearly 300 million people, 200 million of us need to be vaccinated, 2 doses, that means 400 million doses order, placed with the pharmaceutical company. Fiji, about 900,000 people, 600,000 people need to be vaccinated, our order is 1.2 million doses. Who will get priority? We knew that would happen. And because of the efforts of the Minister for Foreign Affairs, also the Prime Minister, the Indians gave us the first 100,000 doses. Then the Australians, then the Kiwis, then the Americans, and now even the French are giving us doses. No Fijian, every one of you in this room that's been vaccinated did not pay a single cent for it. We as a government did not pay a single cent for it. We had to pay for the administration of it. We had to hire vehicles, we had to pay nurses, we had to send people on boats, on horses, whatever it was, to get to people to vaccinate them. But Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a decisive decision made that if we do not achieve higher levels of vaccination, we won't be able to open our economy. No jabs, no job policy worked. The 360 worked. Yes, that was a condition. And yes, it worked. Prime Minister said we'll open before December, before Christmas, we opened on the 1st of December. And we had our national carrier ready to fly. If we did not have a national carrier, we'd be twiddling our thumbs, then Virgin would have said, oh guys, look, we're going to come on the 30th of December. And, you know, Air New Zealand may say, oh, we're going to come on the 19th of December. Or somebody else may have said, Qantas may have said, we'll come on the 30th of January. We would have been left to their whims and fancies. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's obviously some kind of gloom and doom theory by the opposition. And like I said earlier on, everything we did, they have to oppose it. And Mr. Speaker, sir, and everything, was played politically. It's, as we've said in Parliament before, as Bill Clinton said, is the economy stupid? That's what we need to rescue. That's what is our focus. This entire budget has been sent the elections budget. In fact, elections are far from our thought. We are primarily concerned, if you look at the gist of the budget, most of the policies that we announced previously, sir, are continuing. The new things are what we call the inflation mitigation. Everything else is the same. No changes. Some, yes, adjustments here. Forestry's got a bit more money. Certain adjustments have been made in various other heads, but we've continued with that, Mr. Speaker, sir. If we want to do really an election budget, we could have done a lot more. We would have been irresponsible. We would have been fiscally responsible. Deficit has been reduced from 12% to 7%. We could have said election year, let's blow it out. None of them mentioned the deficit has come down from 12% to 7%. None of them. Mr. Speaker, sir, they've of course tried to discredit what has been called the Bainimarama boom. The fact is that we've never had 9 years of consecutive growth in Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a fact. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you see again, Honourable Governor, please don't embarrass yourself. Because you're saying borrowing, all governments in the world borrow, sir. The issue is, when you borrow, what are you using the money for? You see, Mr. Speaker, sir? Mr. Speaker, sir, if you borrow, and if you're going to borrow money to cut a road in Itaukei, connect people to electricity, give people water, build hospitals, build nursing stations, that's good use of borrowing money. You see? Mr. Speaker, sir, again, it's a very fundamental issue. He should know as a former banker, which he says he was, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Prasad has got a number of assets, maybe some overseas, maybe under other people's names, I don't know. But the fact is that he has got assets. If Honourable Charles Singarara, Mr. Speaker, sir, if Honourable Charles Singarara does not have that many assets, the amount of money that Honourable Prasad can borrow will be far greater than Honourable Singarara. It's a fact. That's what happens. The more assets you have, the more capacity you have to borrow, or you can borrow. Very simple, sir. If the economy is doing well, when financiers see that you have a continuous growth rate, they will be able to lend you money. But none of them actually, Mr. Speaker, sir, mentioned the fact that our GDP doubled in such a short period of time. It doubled, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that there was improvement in income levels, Mr. Speaker, sir. People have more cars, more homes have been bought, started new businesses, embraced new opportunities, better services, improved life, Mr. Speaker, sir. That's the result, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the 9 years of growth. Honourable Prasad talks about the marginal economic contraction of 0.69 in 2019, saying the economy was slowing prior to COVID-19. But he conveniently ignores the sustained and strong growth in 9 years prior to that. He goes on about the 0.6%. The world actually went into recession. He doesn't talk about that. Mr. Speaker, sir, to put things into perspective, our real GDP in 2022 is almost 116% higher than what it was in 2006. More than double. Compared to the year 2000, our real GDP is 263% higher. And compared to 1970, our real GDP is 6,311% higher. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is why we called it the Bainimarama boom. Mr. Speaker, sir, and now, of course, we have the Bula boom coming out of the pandemic. And that is despite, Mr. Speaker, sir, being faced with the COVID-19 crisis, despite the natural disasters. They don't seem to mention that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, nobody talks about the 14 cyclones we've had. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about the fact that Cyclone Winston wiped off 1/3 of the value of our GDP in 36 hours. In 36 hours, sir. And I'm glad Honourable Rondrondro acknowledged the fact that the schools we built from the rebuild program, Build Back Better, after Cyclone Winston, none of them got affected. At least I thank him for his honesty in that respect. In the same way, I thank him for his honesty regarding rural infrastructure roads. Yes, not everything is perfect. I also thank him for his acknowledgement how a road from Nandi to Suva through inland Vitilevu would open up opportunities for those landowners. Open up opportunities not just for those landowners, but other Fijians living in other parts of Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, it was quite interesting how Honourable Lalam Balavu does not want to benchmark us against developed countries like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, but he wants us to be compared to Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea. This is the level of opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have in terms of the contribution. A true reflection of the shallow depth of Sudalpa's vision and leadership capabilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalam Balavu came up with his own figures for real growth. He and his so-called economist friends, we know who they are, do not agree with the credible institutions like IMF, World Bank and ADB on growth projections. This is really absurd, sir. In fact, the ANZ, we said, are projecting will grow by 22%. We don't agree with them, but that's their projection. Mr. Speaker, sir, and I hope they're right. Some miracle gets pulled out. Honourable Lalam Balavu also refuted the poverty numbers from the World Bank. Really, Honourable Lalam Balavu? The opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, likes to pick and choose commentary from these agencies only when it suits their political narrative. And that's the point I was trying to highlight. They all have embraced a particular narrative. They will not change from it. Even though the facts may be staring straight at them in their faces, they won't change. Mr. Speaker, sir, they talked about extreme poverty. Extreme poverty is defined by the World Bank is almost non-existent in Fiji. Abject poverty, what we call abject poverty. Poverty rate stood at 24.1% as per the 2019-2020 HIES. This is one of the lowest levels of poverty ever registered in Fiji. In 2002 and 2003, poverty was 35%. In 2008-2009, poverty was 31%. Then it fell to 28% in 2013-2014 and to around 24% in 2019-2020. Based on current population estimates, Mr. Speaker, sir, it's clear that under the Bainimarama government and, of course, the FijiFirst government, almost 100,000 Fijians have been lifted out of poverty. That is the boom, sir. Lifting 100,000 Fijians out of poverty is no ordinary feat. It's a direct result of 9 years of consecutive economic growth and various social empowerment initiatives like free education, equality in employment, creation of 1,000 jobs under the Bainimarama government. We had the lowest unemployment rate in about 20 years, sir. You see, they equate growth with debt levels. It logically does not work. They don't even understand the basics. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, we need to continue to fight more against poverty. It is not an overnight fight. It requires continuous effort. It requires extra effort from everybody, sir. It requires decisive leadership, strategic thinking, way forward thinking, not only up till the next elections, but 5, 10, 15 years' time, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we've said, the budget is fiscally responsible. We've been saying we've reduced the fiscal deficit from 13.8%, sir, to 7.4% GDP. Our debt to GDP ratio is now on a downward path, declining from around 89% this year to 85% at the end of July 2023. Based on our planned fiscal consolidation, the debt to GDP ratio is expected to fall below 70% of GDP by the end of this decade. Mr. Speaker, sir, there has been so much misinformation and fear-mongering about the opposition on the debt issue. And I have to go and do this sort of, 101 kind of lesson on debt. We have said it many times, and Mr. Speaker, and I'll repeat again today, the high levels of borrowings during the COVID-19 period was absolutely necessary and appropriate. That's why we had all our lenders and partners supporting us, because that was the right thing to do. Had we not done that, Mr. Speaker, sir, we would have had a Sri Lanka kind of crisis much earlier than Sri Lanka. The international media in our opposition is trying to portray, or some of the elements of the international media, trying to portray the Sri Lankan crisis as a debt crisis, because it suits their narrative. It is in fact not a debt issue. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Sri Lankan crisis is more of a foreign reserves crisis and less of a debt crisis. They did many things before the pandemic. One of the ministers decided to, Mr. Speaker, sir, overnight, say no more fertilizer, only organic fertilizer. The agriculture output dropped by 50%. So Sri Lanka, with certain products, they used to never import it. They started importing it because they could not have enough food themselves to feed themselves as they grew before. Strain on the foreign reserves, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, they are not able to buy fuel, able to buy food and other necessities and even medicine because they don't have the exchange, foreign reserves. They cannot pay their debt because of that. Mr. Speaker, sir, we, by borrowing more from offshore, basically meant, Honourable Rosoba, understand this, that more foreign reserves came in. So we built up our foreign reserves. Because we knew the foreign reserves that used to come from the tourists no longer can come because the tourists are not coming. And we need foreign reserves to trade. We need foreign reserves to buy cars, buy medicine, buy fuel. All the 3 fuel companies in Fiji buy all the fuel from Singapore. They trade in US dollars. We trade in Japanese yen, Australian dollars, US dollars, Australian dollars. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, with borders closed and the tourism ministry at its feet for almost 2 years, we lost around $3 billion in foreign exchange. Gone. We still had to pay for our fuel bill, pay our medicine, raw materials. All the hardware you buy in Fiji is from overseas. The clothes you're wearing is from overseas. It may be sewn, but the fabric is from overseas, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we borrowed almost $2 billion in external loans during this period, not only for budget financing, but more importantly to sustain our foreign reserves. But also, the triple whammy, of course, was that we used that money to pay for unemployment benefits for our people. $432 million was paid out directly. Those people, Mr. Speaker, and I've said this again, I've said in the budget consultations, the lady who sits in the Hilton corridor in Outrigger, who makes handicraft, she no longer had a job. She benefited from the $90, the 2 rounds of $50, from the 2 rounds of $360. The lady who sells boiled EV, roti parcel, lovo pack, mitai, outside the airport to the hotel, the airport workers, to ATS workers, to Fiji Airways workers, had no longer any business. They were shut down, sir. So she was assisted. People in the informal sector were assisted as a result of that. So we assisted our people. We had built up our foreign reserves, Mr. Speaker, sir. We did not touch the money internally because there's a strain on that. And, of course, we built up our liquidity. So now there's more liquidity in the system, which means interest rates will come down. Mr. Speaker, sir, we also, of course, as a result of what we were doing, how we were spending the money, the Australian and New Zealand governments were happy with the fact that we topped up social welfare. They're happy with the fact that we're rolling out unemployment benefits, also gave us budget support. They also gave us budget support, and we very much appreciate that, sir. And of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, the sale of EFL shares, 44%, helped. They won't tell you the fact that FNPF made a huge windfall from that. They had initially bought 20%, the Japanese came and bought it, they made a huge windfall, which they don't talk about. I'll come to FNPF later on, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is, when we say, what's your alternative? What would the opposition have done in 2020? What would they have done? Nobody. Right from the leader of opposition to Honourable Gavoka, Honourable Biman Prasad, none of them, though political opponents outside, none of them have said what would they have done in 2020. What would have been their formula to be able to arrest the situation that arose as a result of the pandemic? What would have been the economic formula? Ahead, Mr. Speaker, sir, because the borders were closed. Mr. Speaker, sir? Mr. Speaker, sir? See, the point is, they can't say, oh, this is our secret. The events passed. You can tell us. Nothing to do with the manifesto. So you can't say, we would have told you. It's gone. What would you have done? We're not asking you to tell us what you're going to do. We're not asking you to tell you what you're going to do, but what would you have done? Not a single person said that. Honourable Prasad said to cut civil service pay, published in the Free Times, cut 10% pay. Honourable, not honourable, I will say honourable is no longer, well, never was honourable. Narumbe has said that we should cut down civil service size, have flexible, reduce hours. All of them said that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Till today, an Honourable Prasad has the gumption to argue about this, but he has not told us what he would have done. Not he's going to do, what would he have done? Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
You see, he's just howling. It's just noise. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the debt issue, Fiji's debt is at sustainable. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Fiji's debt levels at sustainable levels. This has also been confirmed by the credible international institutions like the IMF, World Bank, ADB, ANZ Bank, international credit rating agencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to urge all Fijians, please, don't be misled by these people. Don't be misled by these people or the people outside. You can see the results on the ground. Mr. Speaker, sir, credible lenders like the World Bank, ADB, AIIB, JICA, and others are willing to lend 5 times more than what they did before. This simply means they have the confidence Fiji will be able to pay its debt, and debt levels are sustainable. No lender would lend to a person or country if they thought the borrower would not be able to repay back. Honourable Lalan Balawu claims that ADB has said that Fiji's debt is unsustainable. That's not true, Mr. Speaker, sir. So if it was true, why is ADB still lending to Fiji? They want to lend to us also in the Nedi River. We said we don't want it. because we have a difference in as to how we should mitigate those risks in regarding whether we should do dredging or build floodplains. Why would someone lend to you if you cannot pay back, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalan Babu, especially multilateral banks that are AAA rated by International Credit Rating Agency? Any restructuring of any sort would result in lower credit rating for them, for the multilateral banks. Yet they continue to lend to us. Opposition experts, so-called experts, can they explain this? They're all lying, Mr. Speaker, sir. These lenders don't listen to the critics here in Fiji because they focus on the truth and do not care about the politics, as they very well know what these opposition politicians are saying is not correct. Fijians also should not fall for these lies, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honourable Lalan Balabu said, oh, they're lending to Sri Lanka now. Yes, that's different. It's what you call a rescue package, rescue lending like they did in Greece. It has come after governments have been toppled. It has come after the government changed a lot of prescriptive policies, austerity measures. They'll tell them to raise their VAT. They'll tell them to cut back on expenditure. They do it with all these prescriptions. Everybody knows that. They're not prescribing those to us, sir. They're not telling us to have these kind of austerity measures that they put in Greece or in Sri Lanka. This is the kind of level of unsophisticated, non-nuanced analysis. Mr. Speaker, sir, measuring debt sustainability is a technical and complex issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. So anyone that takes a simplistic approach and talks about nominal debt or dollar value of debt, for example, $10 billion, is trying to mislead or scare us for their own interest. Simply saying that debt levels increased to $10 billion without looking at other factors holistically makes no sense. Let's take an example. Country A has a debt of US $88 billion, and country B has a debt of US $976 billion. Country B, in this case, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is $976 billion, has almost 11 times more debt than country A. Somebody might tell you that country B is too much in debt. And if you just look at the nominal value of debt, and country A is in a much better position. But it's not true. Guess what? Country B is actually Australia. Country B, whose debt is Australia, whose debt is highly sustainable, and country A is Sri Lanka. But Sri Lanka is in trouble. It's got lower debt value, only US $88 billion. Australia is US $976 billion. But we know that Australia is in a much better position. So again, this kind of rudimentary, basic kind of analysis, crass analysis, does not make sense. Just kind of grab onto something. Oh, $10 billion debt. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is, Mr. Speaker, sir, a classic example to show that the nominal debt levels don't tell you much. This is a classic case to show that the nominal debt levels don't tell you so much about debt sustainability. Sustainability is what matters. In the same way, if Honourable Prasad borrows because he's asset rich and he's cash rich too, he can repay his debt. No problem. He can borrow $2 million. He can still repay his debt. Mr. Speaker, sir, beware. Mr. Speaker, we have to tell members of the public that as soon as someone talks to you about nominal value of debt, he or she is either trying to scare you or probably don't understand about debt themselves. Mr. Speaker, sir, to suit their narrative, they've got onto another platform now. The opposition started quoting debt per capita, in other words, debt per person. Divide the debt by the number of people in that country to compare debt levels across economies. In the same way, Honourable Pio Tukunduandua said, oh, the Prime Minister is not telling the truth by saying that the iTaukei youngsters who are actually millionaires. But if you take the number of the dollar in trust, I think $54 million, divided by the number of young iTaukei people, that means they don't. What a stupid analysis. What's so obtuse? And his leaders backing him up. Everybody knows, sir, that a landowner in Nandi, in a tourism area, will get paid far more than probably a landowner in Laos. You don't take an average. Person in Coral Coast will get far more for the land lease money than somebody in the interior of Daita City. Mr. Speaker, sir. So obviously, that there will be people within that $54 million parcel of money who would get more than others. There are teenagers who've got $500,000. And some of them have got it, now they're only 6 years old. By the time they reach 18, guess how much they'll get. But of course, a young person who's in Laos, where the land is not leased much, or in the interior of Naitasiri, or somewhere else, interior somewhere else, won't have that much. But the landowners where the land is high in demand, they will get more. Makes sense. Landowning unit, Itokotokos, they've got a small parcel of land, they won't get that much money. See, this is basic And Honourable Prasad is just howling on. This is the problem. You see, they latch onto a narrative. They latch onto a narrative, and they just don't want to let go. In fact, in spite of the facts. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalam Balawu and Honourable Prasad, if Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalam Balawu and Honourable Prasad, if Fiji is a debt per capita more than Sri Lanka, why Sri Lanka failed? If they're going to use that analysis. With the debt per capita, they're saying in Fiji, the debt per capita, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, a debt per capita, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Fiji, they're saying is higher than Sri Lanka. If that is the indicator, then why Sri Lanka failed? Australia has a debt per capita of US $41,000. New Zealand has a debt per capita of US $26,000. The US has a debt per capita of US $95,000. While Japan's per capita, while Japan's per capita debt is It's quite amusing, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Japan's per capita debt is $103,000 US. Does the opposition mean by using this Honourable Lalam Balawu? This is the problem when you rely on those people. That these countries are worse off than Sri Lanka? Because their debt per capita is higher than Sri Lanka, which is a per debt capita of around US $4,000 only. So if you're going to use that as an indicator as to how well you're doing, your theory is completely flawed. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have countries like Sudan. Countries like Sudan with a debt per capita of US $1,900. PNG with $1,500. Does that mean that these countries have better situation than Australia, New Zealand and others? That's absurd. It's illogical. It's stupid. It's obtuse. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Prasad, please listen. We hope you have not taught the same to your students. We have more sensible lecturers by Dr. Roop Singh and others replacing at USP. Mr. Speaker, sir. No, you are. That's the problem. Mr. Speaker, sir, the most common way, Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, the most common way. Mr. Speaker, sir, he's made statements outside Parliament about debt per capita, and now he wants to defend it. He's saying it's one of the indicators, when he tried to say that is the indicator. Mr. Speaker, sir, the most common way to compare debt levels across countries is to look at the debt to GDP. Mr. Speaker, sir, please stop muttering. Look at the debt to GDP ratio. This is like comparing a debt to your income levels. GDP is simply measures the total income of the country or the total value of goods and services produced in the country during the year. Again, there is no magic number for the debt to GDP ratio to measure debt sustainability, because even the debt to GDP ratio does not give you the full picture about the debt portfolio. It's largely useful to compare debt levels across countries relative to their respective GDP levels. But again, it does not say much about debt sustainability. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have to talk in that manner. Sir, I have to talk in that manner because your side does not understand. Speaker, sir, this is why it labors me to do this. Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji's debt to GDP ratio. Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji's debt to GDP ratio is on a declining trend since 2009 and reached around 43% pre-TC Winston. The large reconstruction spending after Winston increased the debt to GDP ratio. However, it is still below 50% of GDP, Honourable Kurindrani. This is the same reconstruction effort that was acknowledged by Honourable Randondro. After the COVID-19 crisis, the increase in borrowings and large contraction in GDP has led to the debt to GDP ratio increasing over 80%. Mr. Speaker, Sir, Honourable Kurindrani says that we have exceeded the benchmark 40% debt to GDP ratio. He conveniently forgets the pandemic and the debt levels across all countries have increased. 40% debt to GDP is not a realistic benchmark for all developing countries in a post-pandemic world. Every single country in the world has increased its debt post-COVID. This will eventually come down as the economy recovers, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, had we not borrowed during COVID-19, the economy would have collapsed. We would have had large devaluation, which they don't acknowledge. Social challenges would have increased, at price levels would have skyrocketed, and our reputation internationally would have been tarnished. Through our decisive leadership and various hard measures, we have come out of the COVID-19 crisis successfully. To really understand that, sir, we have to look at various factors like the cost of debt, the ability to refinance debt when it falls due, the exposure to foreign exchange and interest rate fluctuations, the availability of foreign exchange when an external debt has to be paid, the profile, the quantity of debt repayments of the upcoming years, the level of government revenues to service the debt, the purpose of the debt, understanding who are the lenders and what are the lending terms and conditions, what is the state of the economy and the outlook, what are the consequences if government decides not to borrow, and many other factors. It has to be a lot more nuanced, a lot more sophisticated. We are sure the critics are not telling you any of this to the public, Mr. Speaker, sir. But the government, of course, and our lenders watch these closely. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, sir, the FijiFirst government has always been borrowing for capital expenditure and investments which will generate future returns to repay this debt. When the critics claim that the future generations will pay the debt, they don't tell you that the future generations will also benefit from the roads we are building today, the communities we are connecting to electricity today, the schools we are building, a new hospital we are building today, and other infrastructure that we are investing in and indeed planning for the future. The cost of debt, as we know, sir, the cost of building something today is far cheaper than building it 10 years down the track. The cost of debt has also significantly come down, sir. We have borrowed over $900 million. We borrowed over $900 million. More than 10% of our debt portfolio, sir, is highly concessional terms, equating to over 60% grant element. They need to understand that. The amount of borrowed money that we borrowed, we will only pay back 40%. They need to understand, they need to grasp that. The World Bank and JICA have lent to Fiji at 40-year terms, 10-year grace period, and almost zero interest rates. Grace period, of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, and you spell this out for Honourable Bainimarama, we do not have to make the principal repayments for the first 10 years. Again, this $900 million cannot be compared to $900 million in the past, borrowed at over 7 to 10% at 10 or 15-year terms. In 2006, the SDL government then borrowed over $320 million through the issuance of global bond with a coupon of 6.875%. $320 million, 6.875%, with the entire 320 to be paid in a lump sum after 5 years. Imagine that. Paying interest rate of 6.857%, and you have to pay the entire sum at the end of 5 years. This risk profile of the 5-year bond was far riskier compared to the JICA debt we have borrowed with payments spread over 40 years and interest costs at 0.01%. Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji's ability to service debt has increased significantly. We have over 10 times more revenue than what is needed to service the debt every year. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to know that we don't have to pay the entire debt in 1 year. Its repayment is spread over many years, and we have more than enough revenues and over $3 billion in foreign exchange to meet the debt servicing cost. Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, has never defaulted on debt. We will also never default under the current scenario. Anybody that may say that Fiji may default on the debt, of course, is lying. We need to tell members of the public, please don't fall for these lies. We never have and never will default debt. They said China will take over Kandavu because of the debt, if we don't pay the debt. Kandavu is still with Fiji, Mr. Speaker, sir, and China is still where it is. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, please, we want people to rely on the facts. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point I want to make also is about FNPF and Fiji Airways. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Chale, who made this very vociferous statement on FNPF, and I'll need to get the facts here. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Chale was part of the board in FNPF when they made many investments, sir, without going to members of the public, without going to the workers. There's a handful of people. They had what they used to call in those days employer reps and government reps. They actually engaged, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Natandola and Matapo. They had one of the people from Matapo, Gary Irwin, who actually ended up in prison. We had an undischarged bankrupt from Europe, whose name actually is Gerard Silliot. He was declared bankrupt. He had 5 pending bench warrants issued against him. Yet they engaged with them. He used to be flown in a helicopter from Nandi Airport to Natandola. Red carpet treatment, Mr. Speaker, sir. All of this was done. Money was going down the gurgler. No consultations. And here we have, sir, a investment in a Fijian company, and any person who understands investment, sir, would know that if you have a viable company that may then come down because of things outside its control and the share price may drop, And if you buy the shares at a time when the share price have dropped, knowing full well that the share price will increase very soon because business back and booming, you'll get a huge windfall. You'll get a huge windfall. They don't tell us that. They're going on employer-employee reps. In fact, after 2007, sir, we had, because the law was such then, we had people like Felix Anthony and Daniel Urai, who were board members. Sir, yes, we did. Yes, we did, sir, because, yeah, so what? We admit. We did. We did. Because the law at that point in time was the same as it was prior to 2007. Shush, Mr. Speaker, sir. The law was such where we had to, please, you're making a lot of noise. Sir,
order.
The law was such where we had to have 2 employees from government, 2 reps from government, 2 from employees and 2 from employees. My point being, these 2 gentlemen picked up somewhere between $156,000 to $186,000 just in fees, allowances. Sir, they racked up telephone bills up to $3,000–4,000. Honourable Tikon Duandua, who is now sitting on the other side of Honourable Prasad, knows this full well. He was part of the Prime Minister's office then. He knows that, Mr. Speaker, sir. My point being, and the reason I'm telling you this, sir, is that just because you have employee reps or employer reps does not mean that there'll be good investments made. Does not mean that there'll be transparency in the way that they choose investments. I've got a whole list of companies that went under. Tropic Health, Blind Shipping, which your new leader was part of. He was the CEO for a while. Mr. Speaker, sir, there were investments made in other, Honourable Charlie, you may rekindle some of your memory here. They bought land in Nandi without any due diligence. For supposedly a hotel, the land is there. I don't know whether they've sold it or not. All of these things were done, sir, without any proper due diligence. Now all in the name of, oh, we had an employee rep. Oh, we had an employer rep. It is the largest, it is the institution with the largest cash reserves. You need people on the board who know how to make investments. You need a management team that can carry out due diligence. You need an investment committee that can have the acumen and the skill sets and the investment knowledge and know-how and experience to be able to scrutinize anybody that wants to come and make an investment or use FNPF funds. That is what matters. Yes. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I've got the rate of return on the investments. Even in the pandemic, sir, 2020, 2021, 2022, rate of return on the shares was 5%, 5% and 6%. 6%, sir. Even though, despite the pandemic, even though despite the fact that we had a slowing down of global economy, despite the fact that we have the domestic slowdown of the economy, they say we use it as a cash cow. What lot of utter nonsense, Mr. Speaker, sir. Rotuman government borrowed money from FNPF. Rambuka government borrowed money from FNPF. Garase government borrowed money from FNPF. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, you see, this is the level of obtuseness demonstrated by the Honourable Leader of NFP. In this period, when the global economy has slowed down, when businesses had shut down, sir, when businesses had shut down locally, where would FNPF get that higher level rate of return other than in government bonds? Where else? Where else would they have invested? He can't tell you that. He does not know that. In the same way, they can't tell us what would they have done in 2020-21 from an economic budget perspective. They don't know that. You see, all they know, oh, you should not have done that. They don't know the alternative. They don't know the alternative. Mr. Speaker, sir, I can tell you many people. I can tell you many people, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we can tell you many people prior to 2007 who used to have a lot of side deals, Honourable Chale. People used to come, private businesses who used to... Order. Private businesses, Mr. Speaker, sir. Private businesses, sir, who used to come and borrow money from FNPF to put up their buildings. No due diligence. It's who you knew, who was on the board, how many lunches you had, how many dinners you had. Now you have a proper law in place that has that high level of scrutiny. It has to go through various stages of scrutiny. Investment committees, done by the management. In this Fiji Airways sale, they had something like 32 advisors at one point in time to help them make the right decision. They engaged people from overseas who were experts in the aviation sector. That's what happened, sir. And that's what needs to happen. In the days prior to 2007, it did not happen. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to also now continue with the rest. The paper is all messed up. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we've said, that the I've spoken about that. Mr. Speaker, sir, the AFL Fiji Airways deal that they're going on about. Mr. Speaker, sir, many countries in the world, sir, have the airports managed by the national carrier, because the main throughput of that airport is done by the national carrier. It makes a lot of sense. It makes synergy. It creates synergy and a seamless travel experience for those people who come into the country. If you already have the management skill sets, they went into all this conjecture. Nobody's going to lose their job. But as I told the media yesterday, sir, it doesn't mean that everything is hunky-dory all the time. We had some senior management person in AFL who was caught smuggling alcohol. People who came to the airport, friends, families, people who they knew, they brought them along to the duty-free, pushed their way through because the senior management said, let this person take 5 bottles of whiskey or whatever it was. Charged by FRCS, fired by AFL. So please, you need to understand what is happening. And the management of that is nothing peculiar. There is nothing sinister. AFL is still a limited liability company. It still has its board. It does not mean there's a lack of confidence. It's actually providing the synergy that is required. And most airports do that, sir. We don't want disconnectivity. It is, somebody said, oh, it's like guarding Dracula or something, Honourable Prasad said. Dracula guarding the blood bank. What blood bank? What Dracula? I don't know how many movies this man watches, sir. I mean, what is the name of the guy, sir? The Dracula guy? Christopher Lee is no more, sir. Christopher Lee is gone, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, you see, Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot have disconnectivity.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we need these two companies to be in a lockstep, working together to ensure every airline, every visitor, returning Fijian, freight shipper and inter-island travellers see the very best for our country represented at our airports. One of the mandates we have is that Fiji Airways, which also runs Fiji Link, must improve the airports at Lambasa, indeed, and must improve the airport at Tavyuni, and must improve the airport at Savasava. There is a real need to draw those synergies with those, in particular those 3 main airports that feeds tourists, feeds people into that. And the hotel experience, the airport experience must be enhanced, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, we'll build a further collaboration. Mr. Speaker, sir, none of them actually mentioned or were proud about the fact that Fiji Airways is going to commence direct flights to Vancouver. There are so many Fijians who live in Vancouver. There's another market source we can capture. There are people from the east side of Canada, sir, that can also come to Fiji. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lavere, again, unfortunately he's not here, like most of the other siders, make flippant comments. He said, oh, you know, we've let go of our sovereignty because of Fiji Ports Corporation. We have highlighted that several times since the sale of FPCL, sir, that the asset base is still remaining with the sovereign state of Fiji. We have created a company called Assets Fiji Limited, where all the real estate of FPCL has been transferred to Assets Fiji Limited. FPCL and the shareholders are interested in providing the service. They don't really care who owns the assets. They want to provide the service and make money from providing the service. You see, they don't understand that. You don't need to own the asset to make money. You need to own the operations to be able to make money. They don't understand it, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, government, as a result of that, is now receiving 3 times more the dividend it was receiving before the divestment. The net profit after tax, Mr. Speaker, has consistently grown and remained stable even during COVID, and around $22 million plus. FPCL and ports operations do not experience did not experience not even one-day shutdown during the pandemic due to well-established business continuity plans. With the subsidiary partners of Fiji Ports Terminal Limited continuing better turnaround times, elimination of congestion fees, because shipping companies would charge congestion fees at Fiji Airport before this divestment. They no longer have that. No change in fees and charges to counter rising costs internationally. The statutory role of FPCL is still maintained through the Seaports Management Act, and there has been no dilution of the role. And Mr. Speaker, sir, Fiji Ports continues to serve maritime trade links through high standards to Fijian businesses. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Prasad, Honourable Tikundua said that the guaranteed sugar price is completely incorrect and shows that out of political desperation, he and his political party have now resorted to blatant lies. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it's concerning that despite the clarifications from myself in presenting the budget, the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister responsible for sugar, and other members, NFP is still going around telling the people that $85 per tonne guaranteed price will not be provided for. So of course it's wrong, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we call on Honourable Prasad to again publicly withdraw. I know he's not going to do it, he's got too much of an ego, as he seems to have intentionally misled Parliament and confused the farmers and other stakeholders in desperation for political survival. Sufficient funds have been allocated to ensure the guaranteed cane price of $85 per tonne will continue, making it the fourth consecutive year that farmers will get a guaranteed price of $85 a tonne. As you have said, sir, reduced budget allocation does not mean that we have removed the guaranteed price. In fact, the increase in the domestic sugar price, an upward trend in the global price of sugar, has meant that the cost to the government has been reduced. Therefore, the $8 million allocated in the budget is sufficient. It's like if Honourable Rasova decides to bring agricultural produce from Kandavu and say if he starts growing cassava, and we say to him, we will give you 85, we'll make sure that you always get $85 per bag. You go to the market and you get $60. We will pay you the difference, $25 a bag, right? So we have to make a budget reallocation for that. But if tomorrow you go to the market and they start buying your cassava at $80 a bag, we only have to make a $5 allocation for you. So in other words, the budgetary allocation will be less. Honourable Mayor understands this. So, Honourable Prasad to say this, Honourable Tikundua to say this, is actually completely misleading. They don't understand basic finance, basic maths, sir. Mr. Speaker, so again, you see, this is the whole conjecture, you know, going to the public. You won't get $85 a tonne. I'm going to say this come what may. Mr. Speaker, sir. Because I've always said this to Honourable Prasad. Size does not matter. Size does not matter. The size of the budget allocation does not matter. It's the quality of it. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, they've forgotten the fact that we've increased the budget allocation for fertilizer. As some of the earlier speakers from this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, or chambers, have said that the fertilizer price has almost tripled. $80 to $90 a bag. The sugarcane farmer is still paying $20. Before the pandemic, $45.65, farmer paid $20, government paid $25.65. Now, bag of fertilizer is $80, $85, maybe it'll go up to $90, assuming it's at $80. Government has to pay $60 a bag. Farmer will pay $20, still $20. Increased allocation in the budget. Somebody said about, too much assistance to the sugarcane industry. We made a provision in the last budget, sir, that we said that 43% of cane farmers, Honourable Prasad and Tikundua and this Johnny come lately to the sugarcane industry, Mr. Speaker, sir, they don't understand this. 43% of the cane farmers in Fiji cut less than 100 tons, sir. Cut less than 100 tons. So, assuming that I cut 50 tons of sugar, that means my gross income is $4,250 a year. Gross. Take out my cartage, take out my fertilizer, take out my lease money. How much will I make in a year? $2,000? $3,000? $2,500 in 1 year. But why do they continue to cut cane? Because they lose their lease if they stop planting cane. Honourable Tanya Wanganika spoke about landless people. She did not mention these people. She only talked about the black-birded community. She forgets very conveniently these people. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, and we've made an allocation in the budget. We said those people who now want to get into other types of farming or want to go into any other type of lease, please come forward. We've already had 16 applications. People are just tiptoeing now. Out of that, sir, majority of them, what they said, they said, we don't do sugarcane farming, please give us a residential lease. That's all we want. That's all they want. They want a 99-year residential lease, please give that to us, because we need our homes. Because if we don't renew, if they stop planting cane, they'll become landless on Tania Wanganika. They'll end up as squatters here. When Honourable Niko Nawaikula, well, no longer Honourable, Niko Nawaikula went with his mate before, then Garikau, to Vanua Levu. 50% of the cane production went into finished. Those lands are now unoccupied. Landowners not getting any money because of political reason, go into bush, no alternative farming for them. They've all ended up here. Suvarnasori corridor. They all want water now. You're getting illegal connections. Pressure on the infrastructure in the Suvarnasori corridor. They don't talk to you about that. When they talk about water wars, they don't talk about that. They don't talk about displacement of people whose leases weren't renewed. It's a fact. So they're building their homes on top of a sewer pipe. It's a fact. You go to a soccer match, football match, you see all the Lambasa flags here in Suva. Why? Because they are here. Unfortunately for the Suva fans. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the fact. So they have now come forward to us saying, please convert our leases to residential lease. We expect more to do so. More will come forward. And in that way, we will be able to rationalize the sugarcane industry, sir. There are some farmers who are doing well. Some land-owning units have gone into 1,000-acre farming. Honourable Lalan Balawu should know this in Vanua Levu. Honourable Bulitavu knows this exactly well. That's why he gave that speech. Because he's actually working at the grassroots level, he's not working at the political level that these people are. Mr. Speaker, sir, the inflation mitigation versus what they call the freebies. Mr. Speaker, sir, if I could respond to the issue of unemployment assistance, inflation mitigation, social protection. I find it really quite horrendous to listen to the opposition calling them all freebies. If we said, sir, that every person in Fiji will get $180, irrespective of your income, get $180, then I'll say it's freebie. They call it the Sangamoli budget, Sangamoli. Honourable Gerengere Tambua linked it to the, the $1.90, World Bank Extreme Poverty Measurement of $1.90. What she actually fails to forget is that $1.90 is for your survival. It means you have no other source of income. That's what it means. But she used that, you see, crass, not sophisticated in her analysis. Completely pedestrian. $1.90 US dollars, oh, you're giving only $1. These people already have a source of income. This is just assistance to them to meet the inflation costs. How? What a fundamental issue, sir. In fact, I feel embarrassed to actually stand up in Parliament to make these points. I should be sitting down by now. But I have to respond to them. Making all these flippant comments. These are for people who already have an income. Say less than $50,000 you'll get the income. Even social welfare recipients are getting a top-up on top of what they're already receiving. Aftercare fund. Mr. Speaker, sir, government pensioners. All of these people. Then 10% subsidy, sir, on the bus fares. We're not saying to the bus company, hey, you reduce your bus fare by 10%. We know they have to survive too. We don't say to EFL, hey, we're not going to increase your electricity rates. We know they have to survive too. They need to have a good balance sheet. So government forks it out and pays on behalf of the citizens. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Kurin Rani, again, he said, oh, all this money will go to the businesses. Arey, the business is the one that runs the supermarket at the moment you're buying your flour from them. So what's the big deal? The big deal is, sir, is that these people will now have extra money to go and buy. So what he's saying, people don't go to shops. He said, we should not have done this, we should have built infrastructure. Yes. See, the point is this, sir. The point is this, that we are building infrastructure. We are doing roads. Your leader saying, don't give money to FRA. Honourable Randrodro says, give money to FRA. We are building bridges.
I did not say don't give money to FRA. I said budget of $100 million a year to FRA. So please, can you give him a yellow card? He's telling a lot of fibs. Please, honestly.
Honourable member, I haven't got a yellow card. I've only got a blue card.
Throw him out for a while, please.
You have the floor.
Sir, Honourable Gavoka says, reduce the budget to FRA. He says, give more money to FRA. He says, build more jetties and roads. Mr. Speaker, sir, we can do both. If you say to somebody, a family, sir, if you say to a family, look, we're not going to give you the $1.
I mentioned supporting is misleading. I said supporting infrastructure. I mentioned it. I said the cold storage, improvement. In fact, I mentioned some roads. Hospitals needs to improve. Those are the mitigation factor in my view. Don't give money well. I didn't say don't give money. I was saying, sir, that in my view, that is a mitigation factor. But giving the cash to the people does not mitigate inflation. No. Hey, that's what I was saying. An example for a woman to come from Nabosa, paying $70 to go to Koromum Hospital. If they provide that infrastructure, that improvement of hospital in Nabosa, that woman will only pay $10 or $5 to come to the hospital. That's what I said, that mitigating inflation.
You made your point.
Thank you, sir.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, what Honourable Kurindrani said, if I could just correct him, he said that we should focus on those areas. I accept he said that. But what he was saying, don't give this money for the inflation mitigation. Not every person was going to go down to Koromumu. We know that. There are people living in KSC who may not be sick. So what about them? If the price of flour has gone up, if the price of soap has gone up, if the price of sugar, tea, everything's gone up, then we need to help them. That's what you call mitigation of inflation. All other countries are doing it. Even countries like Australia are doing it to help with those costs. The bridge will be built, the hospital will be built, those people will come, but in the meantime there's an immediate need. There's an immediate need that people need to have. There are people with 5 children. If the person is earning $15,000 a year, they've got 5 children, suddenly the price of all these things, the basic items have gone up, those 21 items have gone up, they need some assistance. We're giving to them now. That's what they need. They don't care about some bridge. They don't care about some hospital. And Fiji is not only made up of people in Kasi. There are lots of other people all over Fiji. They need assistance, sir. So you see, as I said in the introduction of the budget on the 15th of July, a budget is about you addressing your immediate needs. It's also about planning for the future. You have to be able to do both. There is an immediate need in respect of this unprecedented rise in price of goods, imported goods. It's a well-known fact everywhere in the world. Read all the reports. Prices are going up. Price of wheat went up. Honourable Prime Minister highlighted the other day, how about on the weekend, Turkey struck a deal with Ukraine and Russia. We don't know whether wheat will come down. But there's an anticipated reduction. In the meantime, the price of wheat will go up. It is going to go up, in fact. Still no access to the wheat. So we're going to tell those families that no, we're building a bridge, don't worry. In the meantime, you go fend for yourself. Go and buy the flour at a high price. We don't care. That's what you're saying, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. This is the kind of what we call, Honourable Prasad said the Sangamoli budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, they may think, Honourable Gerengere Tambua, Honourable Tikonduan Dua, may think it's actually quite funny, but it's actually not. It's a typical what we call a 5-penny contribution to a 5% party. Mr. Speaker, sir. But that's the level of contribution, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have provided, on top of the $500 million, we have provided unemployment payment and financial relief in the past 2 years, on top of the zero VAT, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are continuing with our social welfare payments. We said the market vendors don't have to pay the fees for another year. They actually appreciate that. They don't have to fork out annually $200-300 as some market vendors do, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, but they all call it freebies. There are a lot of people applying for jobs. When they apply for jobs, the employer wants a police clearance. Costs about $40. We're paying that. They want your birth certificate. We're paying that. If you're a taxi driver, a bus driver, a carrier driver, you want to when your taxi license expires, we'll pay for that for your renewal. You're applying for fishing license, we pay for the renewal of that. These are what we call everyday expenses that we're trying to meet. They are small amounts, but they actually have a huge burden on the disposable income of individuals. Very basic, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we'd like all Fijians to know that the opposition is actually saying that we should not give you any of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're saying we should not give you. What they're also saying is that the 20 cents levy we reduce on the fuel, we should not be giving you this also.
That's what they're saying.
Sir, by putting those 21 items on zero VAT, from a revenue perspective, we've lost $165 million. Everybody buys soap. Everybody buys tea. Because we know if those people go and buy that, at 9%, we would get $165 million. But we made a decision to forego that revenue so ordinary Fijians could benefit from it. We made a decision, sir, to forego the revenue that the municipal councils get, but we're actually going to supplement it for them. We forwent that, the revenue that we get from the 20 cents levy on fuel, $55 million. We've foregone that completely. At least the municipal council are getting paid. We're paying it for them on their behalf. LTA is getting on behalf. BDM is getting on their behalf. But those two major expenditures we've foregone. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the other issue that was raised, Honourable Gerringari Tambua made again flippant comment, why 6 months? I think I've already addressed that, sir. If you read most of the literature that's coming out, there's an expectation, God willing, there's an expectation that inflation will peak in 6 months' time. Essentially, when it means peaks, it means after that it will come down. Peak is always the peak, you come down after the peak. It's like climbing Mount Everest and you come down. So that's what's going to, that's why the 6 months. Like I said, God forbid, if the war extends, we don't know what's going to happen. We may have another catastrophe globally. Or inflation may come down sooner than that. We don't know. That's why we need to do a review. That's why a responsible government will do a review of it. In the same way we reviewed after the pandemic struck us, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, she said, oh, because nothing is good with the government and therefore that's why they have to do this. It's not about government being bad or good or not right or wrong. It's about what's going to happen economically, what's going to happen globally, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the other point that some of them did make, they said, oh, you cannot have 12% growth because the global growth rate is only 3%. That's the average global growth rate. Some countries will have 15% growth, some will have 1% growth, some people will have 25% growth. Then you average it out. That's how it works, that's how you measure it. So for them to logically say just because the world growth rate will be 3%, we can't have 12% growth rate. We're starting off from a lower base. Basic again. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've mentioned the taxation that Honourable Gavoka had mentioned. Of course, we've removed 10% ECAL. We've removed the STT. I think he wants to bring it back, STT. He wants to bring back stamp duties, Mr. Speaker, sir. So we've said we want to tell all businesses, all the people who actually have got ease of doing business, that Sodelpa and I don't know who else will bring back stamp duties, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, you see, this is the problem with them. They only look at one figure. This is probably the former FRCS guy who's giving him the advice, but they don't look at the multiplier effect of not having stamp duties. This is the problem. They don't look at the multiplier effect, for example, of giving those kind of concessions on filmmaking. We've reduced it. I don't know whether they acknowledge that in speech or not. I can't actually stop. Mr. Speaker, sir, we've reduced it to make it a lot more amenable to our economic conditions, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've already mentioned that. Of course, he talked about in a very kind of ambiguous manner. He said, you know, Lewa ni Vanua, we'll have the Lewa ni Vanua. And I said at the end of it, who is that? Who's Lewa ni Vanua? Who do you mean? He said, oh, all people. So why couldn't he say all Fijians? Why did he have to go Lewa ni Vanua? It's ambiguous, you see. Again, they're subtly bringing in this ethnic thing into it. All of them. All of them are, Mr. Speaker, sir. No matter how much you say, oh please, that's what it is. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the same way that you defended Honourable Miteli Bulanouda. Mr. Speaker, sir, Pacific Labour Mobility Scheme, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, all Fijians are the beneficiary of the Pacific Labour Scheme. All Fijians are beneficiary of the Duavata initiative that we have with New Zealand, sir. Not on an ethnic basis, Honourable Wanganika. I was quite surprised by your kind of xenophobic comments. That, you know, suddenly we'll be all reduced, we'll become, I don't know, whatever she was saying. And she went on about Indians. She actually lied. She said she did not say Indians, but she did. And when we persisted, only then she admitted it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And in the same breath, early on in the speech, she quoted from the Bible. I really cannot see how people can quote from the Bible or quote from any scripture, but then lie in the process too, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, she also, Mr. Speaker, sir, insulted every single Fijian that has applied to go overseas in the Pacific Labour Scheme, has insulted every Fijian that's currently working there. A few months ago, sir, I was in Wagga Wagga. I had a town hall meeting with those Fijians who are working in Wagga Wagga. A lot of them are working in abattoirs. And the meeting, 90% of the discussions we had with them, they talked about how can they buy vehicles and send it over, how can they invest in FNPF, how can they buy a home, will they be eligible for the first home grant. These people were thinking about investing back home. They were asking about, can you talk to the Australian government because we've been given a 3-year visa, we want to bring our wives or our husbands, some of them were females also, we want to bring our husbands and wives, we want to bring our family members. That was what they were discussing. And to say, and to rubbish that, Mr. Speaker, is a huge insult. It goes to show a complete lack of understanding. So under the Pacific Labour Scheme, the Fijian government does not select the people who go overseas. The Fijian government provides a facilitating role. People have to register through the National Employment Centre, or NEC as it's called. The overseas recruiting employment agencies, they come to Fiji. They look at the group of people they want. And there is, Mr. Speaker, certain opportunities for them. I had to, Honourable Prime Minister, through his initiative, through Ministry of Forestry, they're providing a lot of training now for a lot of young people in sawmilling, in portable sawmilling, using chainsaws, nurseries. There's a huge shortage of people to work in the forests in New Zealand. Because as you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot of the forests in New Zealand, they are run by private companies. They're not owned by the state, but private companies. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, a lot of them have been recruited. In fact, some of the people who were certified on the weekend in Nandi, they've already got jobs. Some of them have been given 3-month contract, 6 months contract. They go, they come back, they earn some money. Some of them work in Fiji. Some of them are talking about building their own business, starting their own business. We are looking at outsourcing through NDMO, etc. When, for example, there's a cyclone, rather than using civil servants, we can outsource it to these people who live in that particular area, in that province, in that village. We can hire them out. They know how to use chainsaws. We'll pay them for that. That's the kind of expertise we are building. That's the kind of business opportunities we are creating. If they get some overseas experience, well and good. They're building that cadre of people in Fiji, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, it seems to me that whilst they talk about freedom, they're going to restrict freedom of movement. So if tomorrow some Fijian wants to go and work in overseas, some Fijian wants to go on a 3-month visit or 3 years visit, they will say to them, don't go. Don't go. Because we want you here. That's their choice. We can't force them. So what they're saying, these nurses who are being demanded overseas, you're going to say to them, don't go. We can't force them. It's a free country. Mr. Speaker, sir. See this kind of lack of analysis in the sort of short-term goal, Mr. Speaker, sir, is quite worrying. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point I want to talk about is USP. They talked about USP quite a lot. Coincidentally, sir, I just wish to read a letter that I received while I was on the floor of Parliament on Monday. And it says, is written to the Pro-Chancellor and Chair of Council, Dr. Hilda Cathy Hain, University of the South Pacific. And it's titled, Whistleblowing Against Director HR and Division of HR. Dear Madam, I've been with USP for the past few years and I currently work in Division of HR. This is to bring to your attention on the actual abuse of office by Director of Human Resources USP. Recently, few selected staff, and she's got in brackets only Indians, have been promoted on acting roles. And these roles have very high salaries. New positions have been created such as HR business partner and team leaders with very high salaries. Only selective names were chosen for this acting role. Why weren't the other staff considered? Staff who are currently on acting roles do not have enough management level experience and are given double the salary. This is just the act of collusion and corrupt practice within division of HR. If HR is unethical, then how other staff outside of HR will be treated? They're setting bad examples. All other division staff are now talking about HR staff promotion, especially staff given acting appointments with no experience on higher role. Some had only occupied HR assistant and HR office rank up till now. The business partner roles have been advertised just for the sake. The positions will be automatically rewarded to internal staff on acting roles. This is just a formality. I will ensure this matter is escalated to higher authorities for investigation on Director of HR. Previously, there have been fraud cases against USP, VC and HR. Again, this matter needs to be raised so there is fairness and transparency in the entire recruitment process. The good applications from within the HR division of USP and outside applications will be discarded. I work here and I know the corrupt process is being used. The recruitment process is handled by Totivi Bokini Ratu, hence copying him as well. The government of the day has been strict on the illegal recruitment process at USP, and now it's again time to investigate. If HR itself is not following the rules and regulations, how can we expect other staff at the university to follow the same? Very soon, other divisions and faculties will follow the same strategy. Restructure, provide fancy job titles, and increase staff salary without proper justification. This is just illegal practice by illegal practice by HR division. There have been other capable staff within HR, and how come acting positions were only given to selected staff, some with no experience? They are all new positions. This is just a scam, knowing that positions will directly be given to staff who are already on acting role. Advertising and conducting interviews are just a formality. This is just so unfair practice where other staff within HR division are affected. This needs to be investigated. Why are other staff within HR treated unfairly? Why can promotions be based on merit? There has been no other division of faculty pay rise due to change in job title restructure. This is just a scam by Director HR. Soon his salary will be aligned. Hoping for positive and fair outcome. This is in line with the whistleblower policy and is copied Director Assurance and Compliance USP, Prime Minister's Office, Totivi Bokini Ratu, and Minister for Education. Attorney General's Office stamp 22/7/2022. Mr. Speaker, sir. Whistleblower. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order. Order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir. The point I'd like to...
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Honourable Lavere and his leader, Honourable Gavoka, did make a statement about a week ago saying, and I only know from the media, that they said, if there is nothing to hide, why are they afraid of investigation? Right? A few days later, I understand Honourable Gavoka has a change of heart now. He wants us to give the grant.
Order.
Mr. Leading Parliament, Honourable Speaker, I said, let's end the stalemate, but leave the running of the USP to the Council and pay up the dues. Correct, sir, Honourable Speaker. Correct that.
It was a change of heart, though. Mr. Speaker, sir, you did say that let's investigate. What are they frightened of? Mr. Speaker, sir, we have continuously said this. The Honourable Prime Minister said this. I understand you also informed the Samoan Prime Minister of this too, after she had dinner at Honourable Prasad's house. Mr. Speaker, sir, it was on Facebook. It's well known. It's okay. Mr. Speaker, sir, with other people, they were there. Mr. Speaker, that's fine. You can have dinner wherever you like. That's fine. Mr. Speaker, sir, I understand all of NFP were there and other of their supporters and all. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is this.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is this.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, just a point of order. Point of order, Mr. Speaker, is, I mean, this is really unbecoming of the Attorney General. He's reading an anonymous letter and is naming and defaming people who can't defend themselves here. I mean, you know, he's mentioning of Vini Bukini. I mean, there were. I mean, I get a lot of anonymous letters about the Prime Minister, about the Attorney General, about what's happening at FNU, what's happening in Ministry of Education. I can come and read all those letters here and name people and defame them.
Order.
I mean, this is really abuse of parliamentary time. I mean, he should just stick to the budget instead of reading a letter and defaming people. You know, it's just absolute nonsense.
Honourable Member, you know very well that the subject of USP has come up in this Parliament so often, right? It's almost a repetition. And all that he's doing is answering to some of those. Now, it's a whistleblower who's sent the letter and he's read it openly.
You have not allowed people to name people. I mean, this man is reading an anonymous letter. Anonymous letter and naming people there and defaming them.
Honourable Member,
that's what he's doing.
I have never made a ruling about that in the past. Never.
Mr. Speaker, you have to make a ruling on it.
Honourable.
I mean, so what you are saying, Mr. Speaker, is that I could come with an anonymous letter and read it here in Parliament and name people. I get so many anonymous letters about so many people here and on issues that were raised. If we are going to allow these standards in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, then, you know, it's a free-for-all. Free-for-all. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker. I think you should tell the Attorney General to refrain from doing that. That's all I'm saying.
Honourable Member, you have made your point. You have made your point. And the Honourable Attorney General is making his right of reply, and he has the right to bring up those matters that have been mentioned. And he's got a right to read that if he wants to. You have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have the right to defame people. He doesn't have the right to defame the people who can't defend themselves here.
Honourable Member, that point about defending the right of people who can't defend them has been brought up in this Parliament so often. By you,
Mr. Speaker, and you have stopped the members from making that.
By you and by others. Honourable Member, you've made your point.
Sir, no names have been mentioned except for Totivi Bokini Ratu. That was the only one. And the letter actually says, if you listen, because I know he's going to get caught up in his theatrics, the recruitment process is handled by Totivi Bokini Ratu, hence copying him as well. That's all. Does not say he's done wrong anything. No other names have been mentioned. So who is being defamed? Who's being defamed? Sir? Nobody's being defamed. Sir, the problem is that, unfortunately for Honourable Prasad, he is very personally linked to this whole issue of USP. We all know.
Yes.
So, not just being a former staff member of USP, but also his spouse is working at USP, and also he has very close links and openly known with the VC. So, unfortunately, I mean, he's kind of a bit jaundiced in terms of his contribution regarding the contributions on the USP. Sir, my spouse certainly does not work at USP. nor have I ever been a student of USP, sir. So I don't have any links with USP. So I don't know what he's on about. So, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Mr. Speaker, you need to make a ruling. I mean, this man, you know, this man is talking about my links with USP. Nothing to do with what of course I have links with USP. Of course, everyone has links with USP. Of course, he has links with people in government. You know, his brother is the CEO of FBC, and he's the Minister for Communications. I can say he has links.
He's not in USP.
I mean, this man goes beyond any political morality, Mr. Speaker, and trying to make a case, trying to make a case.
Order.
I mean,
Order.
I mean, he's gone on and on and on for almost 2 hours, almost 2 hours, you know, pontificating here and there and trying to respond to every little thing that has been said in the opposition, and throws in things here and there to make his point. I mean, this is abuse of parliamentary time and parliamentary process. Absolute abuse by this man. You know?
Order. Honourable members, you know in a right of reply that the person giving right of reply. Wait until I finish. The person giving the right of reply has got every right to answer every statement that was made by that side of the House or this side of the House. That's his privilege. The privilege of, and for this occasion, we're talking about the budget, he's got the right to do that. I don't deny him that right. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, one thing we have learned in the past 8 years, sir, is that when Honourable Prasad starts really getting irked up and starts doing his theatrics, we know that we've hit a raw nerve. When he's been caught out, or when there's something very close to him that we've actually revealed the truth on. So, he raised about my brother, Honourable Bruno. Everybody's talked about my brother at FBC, but FBC is not the subject of investigation. FBC does not get the kind of grants that these people get. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's the point of difference. Please, stop trying to obfuscate, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have made a very simple proposition. The chair of the Audit and Risk Committee of USP raised a number of anomalies. The Chancellor raised a number of anomalies, and we said they need to be investigated independently. Just an independent body. Please tell us what is the truth, and we'll give the grant. I was asked by, I think, Fiji Times or somebody outside, saying Honourable Prasad said there's been so many investigations, nothing's been revealed. There's been no investigation whatsoever on the issue. No, there's been no investigation, sir, on the issue.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, there's been no investigations. There's been no investigation, sir, on the issues that have been raised by the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and the Chancellor. Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I cannot understand why they have this huge, a problem about. What are they afraid of, sir? Is there something they have to hide? Nepotism, favoritism, people being appointed like that letter shows, Mr. Speaker, sir? Mr. Speaker, sir, notwithstanding that, Mr. Speaker, sir, Fijian government continues to assist our USP students through TELS and scholarships. It is an utter lie by the opposition and others, other political parties outside, that the future of students will be bleak because government is not paying the grant. Yes, I would admit, sir, if we did not pay the TELS fees, if we did not give the topper scholarship, if we said to students, don't go to USP, if we said it to them, we're not doing that. The students have a choice. They get a toppers, they want to go TELS, they want to go to USP, no problem, go. That's your choice. We'll pay for it. We've not stopped anybody. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is paying the scholarships and provides loans to students to cover the studies USP. $156 million has been paid by the Fijian government to USP from TELS and national toppers from 2014 until now. No other member countries contributes anywhere near to what the Fijian government pays. None of them. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2014, sir, we paid altogether 4.7 million. 2015, 10 million. 2016, 7.1 million. 2016, 2017, 17 million. 2017, 2018, 26 million. 2018, 2019, 21 million. 2019, 2020, 28 million. 2020, 2021, 22 million. This year we expect to pay 16 million. Altogether, $156 million, sir. That's what we paid. So he's saying, so what? You know, this is, unfortunately, Mr. Honourable Prasad, please, I'm feeling embarrassed for you now. Please, don't. Mr. Speaker, sir.
You are embarrassing the whole country.
Mr. Speaker, I said I felt sorry for him, but, you text me personally. But anyway, Speaker, sir, the Climate Change Act, we have gone over the alterations made to the Climate Change Act multiple times, Mr. Speaker, sir, in Parliament, and the revision being referred to by Honourable Tambua was in fact a change made in early 2020. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have been through this also before. The inclusion of the ban on deep-sea mining, which reflects this government's position on this issue, was originally included due to its linkage to ocean protection. This was an original draft. However, through consultations, it was deemed to be a policy which is better linked to the Mining Act. Deep-sea mining is not a climate change issue, but it should be a condition in the Mining Act. So if you go to the Mining Act, sir, that is technically where it should rest, not in a climate change. You see, again, this very crass analysis. We found, they took out the mining, deep-sea mining from Climate Change Act, let's go for it. But they do not understand that it should be in the Mining Act. In the same way, we don't put mining of other things in here. This is under the Mining Act. Mr. Speaker, sir. It is an issue which is associated with environmental degradation, and it is likely to play a role in exacerbating the stress on our marine environment. That's why it has to be in the Mining Act. That's why in the same way, for example, the Mining Act will set out the parameters. If you're going to, for example, do bauxite mining, how are you going to get rid of the spill that's come from it? How are you going to deal, for example, the tailings? How are you going to deal with that? That's in the Mining Act, Environment Act. Climate Change Act is to do, as the word suggests, climate change. It's not the Environment Management Act. It's not the Mining Act. It's the Climate Change Act, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the kind of level of response I have to do because the Honourable Tumbo and others have put all these things out there without thinking, political point scoring, and then sort of gone off. Very whimsical kind of statements. Mr. Speaker, sir, Part 9 of the Climate Change Act introduces the requirement to design a 5-year carbon budget to achieve Fiji's long-term emission reduction target. This section further establishes the process for the development of a 5-year carbon budget plan to plan a whole-of-economy emissions reduction to achieve net zero by 2050 target. It is clearly written under Section 9 of the law, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the Minister, with the assistance of the National Climate Change Coordination Committee, must determine a carbon budget for Fiji in respect of each of the following periods, Honourable Tamboa. 1 January 2026 to 31 December 2030. 1 January 2031 to 31 December 2035. 1 January 2036 to 31 December 2040. 1 January 2041, to 31 December 2045. And 1 January 2046 to December 2050. Honourable Tambua, please read the Act. Don't get somebody to tell you what is there or not there. The carbon budget under subsection 2A must be determined on or before 31 March 2023. I hope, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Tambua is here with us on 31 March 2023. Mr. Speaker, so time and time again we find ourselves in the same position. The opposition unwillingly do not put the time to read the key piece of national legislation, but have the goal to poke holes in government's approach to critical issues of national well-being, when the answers to their questions are not only publicly available, but also in this case available in written law. Mr. Speaker, sir. Any person, sane-minded person, would know that operationalizing a law as comprehensive as the Climate Change Act cannot be implemented overnight. The reforms it requires are extensive, and we pledged not to fast-track implementation in a way that increases the burden on government and indeed the private sector. Mr. Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot engage in productive debate. The opposition does no more than showing up and just speaking out without actually thinking and doing their research. They have responsibilities as the opposition to ask questions that have a basis. Mr. Speaker, sir, please, and I've said this continuously, please read, please research, and please think. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we've said continuously, there has been no alternative budget being presented. They have not even told us what they have done in 2020, Mr. Speaker, sir. Nor have they said what would they have positively would have done or contributed to Fiji's economy. In fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, they don't even seem to have a policy or strategy. The political opponents are saying, outside are saying, when they deliver the budget, then we'll reveal our manifesto. Honourable Tikun Dundua said yesterday that we will not cost our promises. He said, we're not going to adhere to the law. In the same way, they're not adhering to the advertisement law. That's what he said, Mr. Speaker, sir. He said they're all stupid. When other countries are already adopting this law, sir, you see, they don't want to be honest with members of the public. They have this political culture of hoodwinking people, Mr. Speaker, sir. They feel shame, Mr. Speaker, sir. They feel actually ashamed to tell Fijians their plans, the real plans. And perhaps that is the reason none of the parties have released a manifesto, except I think Unity, which I think that I think Unity is having a fight. I think Unity is.
Orders.
Sir, you see, he's getting really desperate, very desperate. I love this, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. I think they're having a dispute with the Unity political party about who claimed what slogan at the moment. Mr. Speaker, sir, while FijiFirst introduced hundreds of policies, we've not seen any specifics from the opposition apart from criticism. Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, Honourable Prasad, as we know, when has asked for an alternative, ran out of a radio interview in New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalan Balawu questions the increased transparency efforts brought about by changes in the Financial Management Act. He questions about transparency is now mandatory for all parties, including FijiFirst, when campaigning. It's applicable to us too. Do you have a problem with that? We have to be just as revealing as you have to be revealing, sir. The opposition and other political parties are busy fighting on petty issues, such as one party have copied or stolen mission or motto of the other party, Mr. Speaker, sir. Can they successfully run a government? Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Lalan Balawu called Vanua Levu campaigning, Mr. Speaker, sir. Unfortunately for them, we were the first ones to actually turn up there to have those kind of consultations. And mind you, Mr. Speaker, sir, we started budget consultation back in 2016. It's not something new that pulled out of a hat. We've been doing it since 2016, Mr. Speaker, sir. And in fact, they lamented, Honourable Lalan Balawu, how many politicians from the past have never been to that area, nor have they had that level of consultations. Mr. Speaker, sir, they did talk about certain capital projects not being implemented in the past 2 or 3 years, sir. How can it be possible, Mr. Speaker, sir, to deliver the implementation of those capital projects over other urgent and pressing priorities that caused COVID-19 pandemic during these troubled times? If we have capital projects that could be put on hold, and we use that funding to address, for example, increase the budget for health, increase the budget for unemployment benefit, of course we'll do that. If something is not failing and not critically needed now, we'll of course put that on hold. If there are certain electricity projects, we put it on hold because people needed money to be fed. And we did that, sir. That's what you call prudent management. They talk about, these projects weren't implemented. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Lalan Balawu talked about underutilization of expenditure even in 2019-2020. We had COVID in March 2020, sir. And most projects stopped, and most ministries other than the critical ministries, stalled all operations, which were not COVID-related. Another biased analysis to suit the narrative, Mr. Speaker, sir. The Viria Water Project, or some people call it commonly the Rewa Water Project, is the largest ever infrastructure project in Fiji's history. Thus far, at a cost of $270 million. One project, $270 million, sir. Because of over 360,000 Fijians, sir, reside in the Lemi to Nosori corridor and demand approximately 174 million litres of water a day. The production capacity at the moment, sir, is only 172 million litres of water. 2 million litres of water short. Mr. Speaker, sir, by the opening up of Viria, and you can see, if you drive down the back road, past ACS, you'll see there's so much work happening, 7 days a week. They've already laid nearly 19% of the pipes they're supposed to, they've laid 19 kilometers of pipes out of the 27 kilometers they're supposed to lay. Already they've done work so fast. Of course, because of COVID, a lot of the engineers could not come. It will be ready in May of next year, sir. Only a few months away. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it will resolve the water problems. It will end water woes in the Lemhi-Nassori corridor by an additional 40 million litres of water. At the moment, we're short of 2 million. We'll add 40 million litres of water, sir. That amount exceeds the current demand by 38 million litres. What does that mean? Honourable Kepa would be happy to know. People living in Korobo, towards Korobo and other places in Nassori that currently don't have reticulated water systems, they can actually have tap water after that. Because we'll have 38 million litres of more water a day. These things obviously cannot be done overnight. In fact, if COVID had not happened, this would have been implemented by now. They don't take that into consideration. They just simply want to say, oh, no, they're not dealing with it. Water woes are there. They don't talk about the fact that infrastructure has been so old. There's no rebuild program. We are doing that. As Honourable Samate said, it cannot be done overnight. $270 million, of which $32 million we got from the Green Climate Fund as a grant. $32 million is a grant from the Green Climate Fund. Honourable Prime Minister goes overseas, talked about climate change. We go on and talk to all the institutions. As a result of that, we got a $32 million grant towards the $270 million project. Unheard of. It's unprecedented, actually. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the members also did not talk about the housing sector. Honourable Naulu Matua actually talked about the housing sector. She said, about squatters, etc. We have projects. None of them mentioned the fact that in Fiji, never before have we had what we call the first buyer program. We give a grant, sir. $30,000 for those people who earn less than $50,000 a year. You're building your first home. When we announced this last year, we had it previously. We had 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Last year we increased the sum. So within 3 months, the fund finished. It meant that dozens of Fijians were building new homes. It meant dozens of Fijians were also buying new homes. And then also those up to $100,000 can get access to the funds. We also announced in the budget the social housing assistance. What used to be called the 1/3, 2/3 project is now social housing assistance, where we give up to $10,000. We'll give the actual plan for free, which is certified, cyclone certified. We'll contribute that. In that cost, we've also built in for cottage, because we know Lau and various other places, Lomaiviti, they need access. Yasawa, if they want to build, somebody wants to build a house in the village, it includes the cost of the cottage. Mr. Speaker, sir. Good, thank you. I wish you had said that. There are 4 members from Sodelpa that came to the budget consultations. Honourable Bulanauda, Honourable Lavere, Honourable Rasova, Honourable Vosonimbola. We've been calling them for the past number of years. They don't turn up. I think the first time they turned up, Honourable Randondo and a couple of others had turned up there. After that, nobody turned up. And I actually thought, because Honourable Lavere gave this wonderful appreciation speech at the end of it all, I thought there would be some common sense that would come out of the delivery, but they didn't. None of them. None of them. Honourable Bulanauda, Honourable Bulanauda, I kind of expected that. None of them.
Order.
Read the hand sign, Honourable Speaker, sir. We did appreciate some of the things that have been done, but we suggested more areas which we can invest into, expand into. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, he also threw in terrorism and all that in between, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Don't lie.
Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable, I think Prasad had mentioned about how we gave housing numbers and all of that before the 28 budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have 42 sites for development leases. Most of this land, Mr. Speaker, sir, where we have what we call squatters, where we have, for example, sir, we go and pay the development lease to TLTB, and so those squatters who used to, under Bakabanua arrangement, where they may be paying the local landowner, or just one individual, $30 a month, $50 a month, or sometimes when there's a mangiti, they are going to come and demand more money. That's all stopped now, because we now pay that lease money, development lease money, directly to TLTB, who then gives it to the landowners. So those people living in those 42 areas, again, they did not mention that. They no longer are paying any money. What we have said, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that we will develop these as subdivisions. Honourable Tanya Wanganika had a go at us regarding the new laws we had put in place. There are certain squatter areas, sir. As we all know, squatters don't build their homes in alignment with a road. In fact, there's no roads most of those places. So some people build houses right next to each other where they can actually hear each other snoring. There's not enough space between the houses. If we are to do a proper subdivision, sir, where we are paying the lease, where we have got the development lease, if they want the 99-year lease, if they want the roads, the street lights, the footpaths, a 99-year lease, and those people, some of them will be subsidized because low-income people, they need to align their homes with the subdivision plan. How can we build a road between two homes if you can hear the other person snoring? Where will the road go?
Underneath.
We have had, Mr. Speaker, sir, a number of these projects put on hold because these squatters, some of them, most of them may be in agreement, but there's 5 of them, I'm not going to move my home, come what may. I'm not going to allow for the drainage. We are paying for the lease. We got the development lease. One has been held up for the past 5 years. Why? Because 3 or 4 people don't want to move their homes. So what we've said in this law, that if, and she bothered to read it, rather than trying to score political points and going on about freedom, etc., Mr. Speaker, sir, in that law, we have said that if we've got a development lease and we are going to subdivide the land, you have to move your house to another area so we can build a road. Put the drain, put the footpath, put the street light so buses can come and run there. You can drive your cars there. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. They're not being displaced, they're simply being told to move to another area. If they don't comply, they have to comply. We'll move it for you. Otherwise, we'll be languishing for the next 20, 30 years. It's a practical solution. Yet they go on about this. Pontificate as if there's something drastically wrong. In the same way, Honourable Tanya Wanganika said, oh, you're following Rambuka. He said to nationalize land, we're nationalizing. And she used the Surfing Act. What a stupid lot of nonsense. Does she know that Cloud Break, which is a surfing area near Tavarua, was licensed by the Rambuka government, or post-87, by one of the governments? Tavarua Resort was given a 20-year license over the surfing area. An individual foreign company was given a license. Honourable Lalan Balabu may know about this. What did that mean? It meant the people from Nambila and other places could not even go there themselves. You could only go once a month, on a Sunday or Saturday or something, once a month. And other Fijians who wanted to surf could only go on that once a month. People from other tourists from other resorts could only go there once a month. Only if you stayed in Tavarua could you go and use Cloud Break. Exclusivity. Cloud Break is one of the best surfing waves in the world. There's apparently only 2 places in the world like that. People come from far and wide. So, at the behest of the Fijian government, at the behest of the Fijian people, you had one company that made zillions of dollars because the government gave them 20-year license. At the Nandro and Novosa Provincial Council meeting, when I went with the Honourable Prime Minister, and other ministers were there too, one of the villagers, I forget his name, I wrote his name somewhere, he said to me, thank you very much for this act. Because now I've got a thriving business. Because tourists come, and I've got an outboard engine, and I take them and I charge them lots of money. I'm making money from taking people to this surfing area. He does not have to go and get a license. Nobody from Tavarua or some other company stops him. And he's a member of that Golingoli area. And he's making money, he's got his business. What's wrong with that? And she here is saying that we've nationalized it. What stupidity. Again, because, sir, she was pontificating, she's going on this ethnic line. That's basically what it is. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other point that I will also wish to make, sir, is that the budget does not in any way address the issue of NCDs, that we do not have a holistic budget to address issues such as substance abuse, NCDs and other issues. Mr. Speaker, sir, if you look at the budget, I did not say it in my speech because they would have said I'm giving a long speech. Could have been a 4-hour speech then. But if you look in the budget, if they read the budget estimates, through the 2022-23 budget, sir, the Ministry of Health has been allocated $5.4 million in funding, which is an increase of $2.2 million that covers 29 public health programs, such as communicable and non-communicable disease prevention and control, HIV/AIDS prevention control programs, Fiji suicidal prevention program, mental health awareness, polythene bowls, among other programs, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Chale talked about, we have we have deserted all our foreign relationships. The people are looking down on us. Again, what a preposterous statement. Does he know what's happening? Maybe he just irked about the fact that he was given an invitation. But the fact of the matter is, sir, is that Fiji's international presence has been far greater at this point in time than any other point in time. Fiji, our Prime Minister, is looked upon by many other countries in the world, regional players, who looked upon his leadership to be able to quell regional issues. And he provided the leadership. A lot of that has been done privately. A lot of them has been done behind doors. But we achieved the outcome. For the first time in Fijian history, Fiji got invited to G20. G20 for the first time, sir. So they don't take all of this into account. They're caught in a time warp. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable, I think Lenora Gerengere-Tambua went on about civil service pay, just to sort of remind them that, civil service pay obviously did not get cut. Civil service salary is about $1.1 billion. Maybe she's just trying to cover up for the fact that her leader said give them a 10% pay cut during COVID. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact is that we've also recognized, highlighted by the Minister for Health and others, that those scarce skills said midwifery will get allowances, waiting allowances. The allied health workers will also get paid overtime, even though in a different band. All of that we adjusted. The teachers are getting that increased salary, Mr. Speaker, sir. All of that is happening. The Honourable Bulana Uda said, oh, why is this increased budget for RFMF? Is Fiji going to be invaded? Again, such a superfluous comment. And as the Honourable Minister highlighted, we said in the budget speech also that the reason why the Seg 1 has increased is because of the fact the allowances that need to be pegged to the salary was caught in the 2013 allowance. 2013 allowance, right? Yeah. The 2013 allowance. So we're just bringing that into alignment. And somebody was questioning, I don't know whether Honourable Gerengere-Tambua or Tanya Wanganika, one of them, over there questioning the timing of it. They did not question the fact that MSEF has also been given the increment. We wanted to do this during COVID, sir, but of course we could not do it COVID. You don't understand. We could not do it in COVID. 2020, we could not do it. 2021, we could not do it. Now when we've got the fiscal space, we're doing that. Same thing we've done with MSEF. We announced that in the budget. There's some key qualified people who are leaving because the salary structure in MSEF. We've increased that so we can retain them. Mr. Speaker, sir, the last point that I'd also like to make, sir, a couple of last points, very quickly, sir. The Honourable Tui Sawau went on about Act 22 of 21, which was commonly referred to as Bill 70. It's no longer a bill, it's an Act of Parliament. No consultation. And again, Mr. Speaker, sir, before the enactment of 22 of 21, sir, in order to lease iTaukei land, there are 5 things you have to comply with. One, of course, you have to have 60% of the members of the landowning unit, whether it's Matangali, Toka, you have 60% of them have to agree to lease the land. Requirement. Number 2, sir, they have to agree for what purpose they lease the land for. Number 3, sir, they have to agree for how long they will lease it for. Number 4, they have to agree for what will be the premium paid. In other words, you value the lease, and then whether they agree with the premium. And number 5 is whether they agree with the annual lease payments you make. Those 5 things, Mr. Speaker, sir, existed prior to 22 of 21. Those 5 things after 22-21 has not changed. Not changed at all.
Still there.
Still there. The consent of the landowners for those things were required before the law, after the law. Not changed. Honourable Tikon Duondua went on about it, all these other people, because they thought this is political capital for us. We can now go and tell the iTaukei people, your rights have been taken away. It was not affected at all. They all jumped on the bandwagon, still harping on about it, hoping that might get them some votes. Mr. Speaker, sir. The only thing that's changed, sir, is the administrative arrangement with TLTB. The same thing, sir, applied to state land. The state land also, sir, when you acquired state land or lease, to get electricity, to get water, to get a mortgage, you have to get a consent of the Director for Lands all the time. Same thing with TLTB. Electricity, water, mortgage, TLTB management. Not landowners, but management. This has seen so many people have given us feedback, so many landowners have given us feedback saying this is great. Because now we're getting more people demanding for our land. We can ask a higher premium. It's as simple as that. What is wrong with the iTaukei landowners getting a higher rate of return on their land? What is wrong with that? I ask that question continuously. What is the objective? You see, these are the same people. Before 2014, they said you vote for this constitution, you vote for Bainimarama, you live in reservations. Honourable Bulitavu and Honourable Niko Nawaikula did videos on that. We know that. Then 2018, before 2018, they said Kandavu is being sold to China. Now before this election, now they're going on about Bill 17. No traction. No traction. Since the 2013 constitution, since the 2013 constitution, since, as they said, Bainimarama becoming Prime Minister, since Bill 17 or Act 22 of 21, no rights have been affected by the iTaukei people. None whatsoever. All of those three things have come to no fruition as far as their advocacy was concerned. None whatsoever. No iTaukei people in Fiji today will say that their rights have been taken away or that somebody is leasing their land without their consent. Nobody. And that's a fact, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, just lastly, I wanted to make a point. They went on about the voter turnout. Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is that the voter turnout, of course, we don't have what we call compulsory voting in Fiji. And we agree with everybody that says the voter turnout was low in 2018 compared to 2014. Yes, it was low. And we don't like it to be low. Of course, countries like USA, voter turnout is in the 50%. Some other countries much lower. We want it to be higher. In 2014, it's about in the 87 or 86%. It is therefore the responsibility of every single political party to ensure that the voters turn up to vote. It is therefore also the responsibility of every single political party to not castigate the electoral system. On one hand, you castigate the electoral system, you castigate the institution that's running the elections, and then you expect people to turn out to vote. You yourself are undermining the actual process. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honourable Gerengere Tumbu and others, when we say about how corruption is reduced in Fiji, this is Transparency International's report. It says citizens' views and experiences of corruption. They highlight, oh, electoral system is corrupt. We are interfering. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reports by credible organizations say otherwise. It says, we ask citizens in all countries about their personal experience with corruption in accessing basic services, such as healthcare and education, to better understand what happens in people's daily lives. We found that bribery and the use of personal connections are widespread in many parts of the region and across many key services. Which is the highest one? Solomon Islands, 21%. Vanuatu, 21%. New Caledonia, actually they're higher than them, 31%. Tonga, 38%. Samoa, 17%. Fiji, 5%. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Again, looking beyond bribery, the misuse of personal connections. You know, these NFP people always go on about personal connections. Bribery is not the only form of corruption that people can experience when interacting with public services. Relying on personal connections is a form of favoritism that can introduce systemic biases in how public services operate and which groups are able to use them. New Caledonia, 52%. Vanuatu, 40%. Solomon Islands, 36%. Tonga, 55%. Samoa, 27%. Fiji, 17%. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not published by the Fijian government. This is actually published by Transparency International, which is actually a leading organization in the world that assesses. Mr. Speaker, sir. Then we have studies here. Sextortion rates, if you know what that means. Honourable Prasad? Mr. Speaker, sir. French Polynesia, 92%. New Caledonia, 76%. Papua New Guinea, 51%. FSM, 46%. Solomon Islands, 33%. Kiribati, 31%. Vanuatu, 22%. Fiji, 11%. Samoa is less than us, 10% by one, and Tonga is 5%. Pacific average is 38%. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have to highlight this because I remember when presenting the budget, when I talked about how corruption is reduced in Fiji, Honourable Gary Tambua made a very sniding laugh about it, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, sir, here we have vote buying rates by country. FSM, 58%. Papua New Guinea, 57%. Kiribati, 45%. Solomon Islands, 25%. Vanuatu, 25%. French Polynesia, 23%. Samoa, 11%. New Caledonia, 6%. Fiji, 4%. Tonga, 3%. Pacific average, 26%. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir. And this is on the flip side. It says, taking action. Ordinary people can make a difference in the fight against corruption. That's how they feel. Solomon Islands, 84% believe that they can make the difference. Fijians, 83% feel that they can make a difference. Mr. Speaker, sir. And then the others, of course, are lower than us. Mr. Speaker, sir. That's the summary of all of the ones that I wanted to say. The others are quite long. The last point I also wanted to make, Honourable Kurindani and various others talked about this. You know, they talked about other countries' debt to GDP ratio. If I can read this out. New Zealand, Mr. Speaker, sir, debt to GDP ratio before 2018, in 2018, before the pandemic, was 28%. After the pandemic, 52%, almost double. Australia, 42% before the pandemic, 62% after the pandemic. Let's look at tourism-driven countries. Maldives, before the pandemic, 72% debt to GDP ratio. After the pandemic, 137%. Mauritius, 66% pandemic, before pandemic, 101 after the pandemic. Bahamas, Caribbean countries, all tourism-based countries, 62% before the pandemic, 103 after the pandemic. Mr. Speaker, sir, St. Lucia, 60% before pandemic, now 96%. Fiji, 46%, 80%. That is to put it into context, Mr. Speaker, sir. The last point I want to make also, and I've got the nominal value of the debt. Nominal value of debt. And this is, see, the other day I think Honourable Balabu, one of them, compared us. But when you actually measure debt internationally, you measure it in US dollars. That's how everybody does. Tourism-dependent countries' nominal debt value, if you came to the presentation which Honourable Rasova, Posanimbola and Lavere and Honourable Bulanahuda came to, Bahamas, their debt level is 11.4 billion US dollars. Mauritius, 11.2 billion US dollars. Barbados, 6.6 billion US dollars. Maldives, 6.3 billion US dollars. Fiji, 3.7 billion US dollars. And then you have, of course, St. Lucia, 1.7 billion, Seychelles, $1.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, sir, if you look at the larger countries, and this is US dollar again, but trillions of dollars. Not billions, trillion. US is the most debt-ridden country in the world. $30.5 trillion is their nominal debt value. Japan, $13 trillion. People's Republic of China, 12.8 trillion US dollars. UK, 3 trillion. India, 2.8 trillion. Australia, $976.7 billion. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to put that into context and highlight that to you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to thank you very much for your indulgence. I'd like to thank all the members for their contribution, and more importantly, Mr. Speaker, sir, to all those Fijians, like I said in the beginning, who contributed to these consultations. We've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands of people regarding this budget. This budget, sir, as we've said, is about addressing some immediate issues like inflation, and it's also about putting in place various processes for long-term planning. We've invested, for example, into the ICT infrastructure. The Honourable Bhiman Prasad made a mockery of our BPO sector, saying, oh, we gave all these incentives, nothing's happened. Very slow. It is happening, Mr. Speaker, sir. You don't just because you go off an incentive this year, suddenly people will start coming in. You need to look at other incentives. You need to be able to make sure that the communication sector is liberalized. You need to make sure the cost structure is good. You need to make sure that, for example, as we said in this budget, we're putting a landing station in the Western Division. We need to build redundancy. We're currently talking to a submarine cable company to put another submarine cable to land in the Western Division, just in case, God forbid, something happens to the Southern Cross cable. All of those things are being done, but the BPO sector grew 3,000 jobs during the pandemic. They do not acknowledge that, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as we said, the budget is about the future. It's about the immediate needs. It's also putting in place the various strategic policies that we had in regards to that. And we look forward to ensuring, sir, that we provide the stability, the level of consistency, Mr. Speaker, sir. Some people talk about it's time for change. The issue is change to what? If anything, sir, the contribution by the members of the opposition inside Parliament and those outside is anything to go by, then it would be really stupid to make a change. Because this is the only side, this is the only government, this is the only political party that can provide decisive leadership, that can provide strategic leadership. It has a vision, and in fact, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are, no matter how much Honourable Gavoka will laugh, no matter how much he will laugh, Mr. Speaker, sir, and no matter how much of a mockery Honourable Prasad wants to make, the fact is that FijiFirst government provides stability, provides confidence, it gives justice to all Fijians, and it makes sure there's equality, both not just in the distribution of the economic well-being of our country, but also in respect of the rights of all Fijians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.